Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this event, the GRID-Geneva Science Day, which will focus, which title is From Data to Environmental Action. We are now formally opening this event, and I have the pleasure to introduce you to the four speakers of this open session, welcoming you to this event, who will be setting the scene. We have the representatives of the advisory board of the GRID-Geneva, the three-party organizations that are supporting GRID-Geneva. We have Bruno Pozzi, the director of the Europe Office of the United Nations Environment Programme. We have also with us Anthony Lehmann, a professor at the Institute for Environmental Science at the University of Geneva. We have Sybille Vermont, the deputy head of the Global Affairs section at the Federal Office for the Environment, and the director of the UNEP GRID-Geneva Center, Pascal Peduzzi, will also be speaking at this session. And with no further delay, I'm giving the floor to Bruno, who is with us online.
Thank you so much, Diana, and thanks once again to the GEN for supporting and organizing this event, and thanks to the Swiss Federation for the support they give to the GEN, but also to GRID, and we'll hear from Sybille in a few minutes. It is really a pleasure to be with you. Apologies, colleagues, that I can't be in the room, although we are back into physical meetings most of the time in Geneva, with social distance, definitely, and with all the precautions needed. A number of back-to-back meetings today make it impossible for me to be with you as I'm connecting with different parts of the world. But let me say that if there's one thing that we learned from COVID, but also from Glasgow recently, is that science is the best element that we have for decision making. And the decisions, when they are based on solid evidence, solid scientific evidence, enable the political level to make better decisions and to make more convincing decisions. Not always, but at least once the science is there, there is an important background that allows for well-informed decision making. And in UNEP, we obviously believe in strong science, in strong scientific evidence. We've got a normative mandate that drives us since nearly 50 years to bring environmental action into reality. And to do this, we use the science and most recently the data to drive our action. And as we set the tone on the global scene on what matters in terms of environmental development and why it's important to have the environment at the center of the decision making for the next century if we want to achieve these sustainable development goals that are driving us in the UN system. Well, when we set the tone, we need strong science, we need strong data. And Geneva has an important role to play in this framework, not only because it is a UN hub and a lot of our sister agencies are headquartered in Geneva and have developed a strong corpus of data and of scientific evidence, but also because Geneva itself is a strong scientific hub for UNEP, because the GRID Geneva is hosted there, but also for the UN, thanks to the strong institutions that are located in Geneva, starting by the University of Geneva itself. What we try to do as UNEP, with the support of our partners and friends in the room, is to create these synergies that make the UN stronger and that make then the scientific place of Geneva stronger. And I hope that today, through this Science Day, we're going to achieve a little bit more of this, creating the synergies, creating the platforms, creating the network that we need to crisscross the pie and get the best scientific evidence that will support then with the latest data our environmental action and make the transformation that the world is needing. Thanks a lot, and so happy to have this event today. Over to you, Diana.
Thank you very much, Bruno. It's now my pleasure to give the floor to Anthony Lehmann from the University of Geneva.
Thank you very much. It's also a great pleasure to be here and to represent the University of Geneva. It has been a long endeavor together with this partnership and with FEUN. And it's, I think, really the work that is being done here to, as it was just mentioned, bring the necessary scientific information to address those ever increasing challenges caused by environmental issues is at the heart of the work being done at GRID. Many organizations are doing this, we could say, in the world, but not so many as well as the GRID is doing in this very particular ecosystem of Geneva with access to all these international organizations and data centers. So each time I know quite well the work of the GRID, but each time I participate in the advisory board, I'm impressed by the progresses made. And I think really in the recent years, we moved to trying all kinds of very nice potential tools to being very close to really bringing this kind of changing ways of informing decision makers and the people to create this change in behavior in importance and priority that we need across society. So I will do all my best to support the continuation of this partnership and hopefully reinforcement from the university side. And yeah, when I see the work that has been done, for instance, around MAPEX, around the World Environmental Situation Room, around the sand issue or the Swiss Data Cube, these are all examples of products that really matured within GRID and reached this level of influence, of importance that we would like to see more and more. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anthony. It is now my pleasure to move to our next speaker, Sybille Vermont from the Swiss Federal Council of Federal Office for the Environment. Sorry, please, Sybille.
Sorry, yes, the Federal Office for the Environment in Bern. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be with you. It is quite an honor for us to be here on this UNEP Science Day 2021. I'd like to thank UNEP, the GRID, and also the University of Geneva. We are indeed in a very interesting partnership, and I'll explain why. I think what is very important is we have data, and data is collected. But before we get to environmental action, it needs to be presented in a specific form. And we are actually a first provider of data as well as a federal office, as we are also an agency, but we are also a consumer of data. And why do we consume data? Because we have to take policy decisions. We have to propose to the Swiss population some proposals for new laws, new policies, so that we can improve the environment. But to do that, you need to have the data in a certain representation, in a certain shape, so that we can understand that. And I have to say, the GRID is really fantastic for presenting the data in a specific manner that is understandable, but not only to the ministries of environment. I think here, when I read the title, I kind of had a little question mark: from data to environmental action. Actually, the actions have to be taken by everyone, from the public, but also from the other sectors, not just the environment sector, but also the economic sector and the social sector. We are all in together, and we've seen it in Glasgow. Everybody's concerned. But to be able to understand data, and I come from the scientific field, and 40 years ago, we didn't have all the models you have. I mean, we really had to invent new methods and things like that, put data together. It was very, very difficult also to represent the data the way actually the GRID now is able to do. So we are at a fantastic point in time to actually be conscious. We can't ignore what we have, because we have very good data, but we also have very good means to represent it. And it is actually the innovations that the GRID is bringing into the picture that makes that data so much more relevant. But when I say to all of us, it's really to all of us. So I thank you very much for being here, and I'm looking forward to this very interesting afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sibyl. And to conclude these welcoming remarks and the setting the scene of the event today, I have the pleasure to turn to Pascal Peduzzi, the director of the UNEP GRID-Geneva.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everybody. There are so many questions on the environment, how climate change is affecting water supply or snow coverage. Where is it burning at the moment? Is it affecting forest or protected areas? What are the size of the ozone hole or the Arctic sea ice extent? Is it shrinking or not? What are those trends? And what are the level of emissions of this in this country? Are they following what they signed in the Paris Agreement? And what can we do to limit impact on sand mining on the environment? All these questions are fantastic, but they request a lot of data. But many people cannot get access to the data. I give them a satellite imagery, what do? They don't have the software, they don't have the knowledge on how to bring this data into something meaningful to them. And that's what the GRID Center are doing. And UNEP GRID-Geneva is the UNEP Center for Analytics since 1985. So after 36 years, we've been supporting UNEP in transforming data into information and knowledge to make sure that we can keep the environmental review, that we can see if the multilateral environmental agreements are being respected, if we are moving toward progresses to the sustainable development goals. So this team of 20 data scientists with large experience in transforming data into information are very essential for being these intermediate between the data themselves and the policy decisions. So we know which data can be used for what purpose, because that's the core foundation of the GRID Center. It was created for bringing the science interface with policy and to guide the policymakers on finding the narrow pathway to sustainable development. And we don't have much time now with climate and biodiversity and pollutions. All these thematics request actions and based on the best knowledge, and that's what we want to provide. This direct access as quickly as possible, near real-time information, bring to the policymakers for taking the right decision and translated into the right action. And hence the title of today, it's really linking data to action. This is what we do, but we're not doing this alone. We do that as a network, as a partnership. We are part of the One Global Partnerships worldwide. We are part of the GRID Network Centers. We are part of the UNEP Science Division, working with all the division and all the regions in UNEP and all the multilateral environmental agreements, the conventions, and so on. And for this work in transforming data into information, this is we've never lived in a world of so many data. We are in the era of big data. And for that, we rely on those data partners that work with us, that do the same kind of work, but with other teams worldwide. And we've been inviting some of our friends here located in Geneva. Geneva is probably the places in the world where you have the highest density of organization dealing with the environment and with data on the environment. Think about WMO, the Group on Earth Observation, IPCC Secretariat, all the conventions that are in Geneva. And so it's being at the heart of this Geneva Environmental International Organization give us this possibility, this position for really helping UNEP in doing their mandate. So we will have a glimpse today of some of the activities and some of the activities of our partners. So welcome to the Science Day.
Thank you very much, Pascal. And now that we have set the scene, we are going to move to the first panel of our event today, from data to knowledge sharing. And to moderate this event, this panel, I have the pleasure to turn to Stephen Ramage, who is the head of external relations at the Group on Earth Observation. Stephen, over to you.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all the speakers before me for setting the scene. So this session, just to repeat, is from data to knowledge sharing, and we will have a number of speakers. We'll have 3 speakers, each delivering between 7 to 10 minutes, and then a discussion and a wrap up at the end. So as everyone knows, we have more data than ever. However, most people don't need data, they need information and knowledge. And as Pascal mentioned, the question is how to automatically transform raw data into useful and usable or used information and knowledge, and how best to share these where needed. So the session, as I said, we'll have some experts speaking on the topic. showcasing how it's possible to bring useful knowledge to act on the ground at the right time in the right location. And we'll discuss geospatial tools, statistics visualization, interoperability, and how to provide rapid access to up-to-date information to support environmental governance and actions. And then, as I said, we'll follow with some questions and open discussion. So our first speaker is Andrea De Bono, and Andrea will speak about information platforms for tracking countries' progress towards sustainable development. Over to you.
Thank you. You can start with the first slide, please. Okay, perfect. You can change. So I will try to explain what we do in the practical ways, this kind of translation between the data into information and knowledge. And for this occasion, we have two different platforms that are classical country profile platform. This means that information is delivered by country. And one is from European Community demand, is more decision maker oriented, while the other one that is called VES Common Country Analysis on the right side of the screen from UNEP is oriented to monitoring the SDG progress of the country together with the possibility to offer to each country a space, a place where they can publish their data and information. Keep in account that if you can see there is any URL on the platform because they are not yet published. It will be by the end of this month. This means tomorrow. No, we have 10 days more. So we are in this final sprint, but we will have more news during the month of December. So next, please. I will focus on the interactive country fishes platform. This comes from European Community. So one of the questions, the very not easy to answer question how deal with the technical side and human side. I mean, how we can automate it as much as possible, the flow of the data, and how we can use this data in order to produce information and knowledge. Of course, we have a technical and human interaction that are not always simple to separate it, but we don't want to do this. And we start with this example for the platform. And the first thing was to identify clearly what are the goals of the platform. In this case, it is something that oriented to decision maker in order to assist the European Commission in the strategic vision to support the different countries in the sustainable development, and what the people want to find on the platform. A lot of things, of course, but we try to summarize four main points. So I have a very fast, simple country overview with the state of the environment of the country, a policy analysis, and a systematic organization of information following some parameters, and of course, as always, the up-to-date information. Next, please. So let's go to the platform. Well, this is the first page for Philippines, for example, and it's introductory page. Next, please. So it's a country overview page. Next, please. You have on this part that I marked in blue, a first contribution for national focal point of the country. Is for each country you have an expert that compiled this kind of test that is related to different arguments and correlated with the data that you can see on the right. Can you? Thank you. And the data is organized inside something that we call widget or custom charts or custom maps of visualization that can be used and reused and are based on mainly on automatically updated from the data from the sources. Can you change, please? Okay, we are a little bit more in deep now in the platform. Next, please. we are in the section of indicators that was validated by experts. So we have a cooperation, strict cooperation with the different experts at different level. Next. And they decide to to divide the information in 8 thematic areas. It's like we can see it's too small, but like climate change, water, pollution, XO, classical. And inside each of these different pillars, the information is already subdivided into driver pressure, state, impact, response framework. And for each of these different elements of the framework, you have next, please. You have a dashboard, a widget that is called dashboard. Is a separate entity that collects a set of visualization, cartographic, for example, in the down of the image, charting that you can parameter, you can use filter and so and also this kind of visualization could be shared with other platforms. We'll see later as we can do this. Next, please. And on the last panel, that in very important contribution of national focal point that is make an analysis following the main subdivision that we use for the presentation of the data. So we have the marriage between the data indicators more and the contextual analysis. Next, please. So a little bit more in an abstract way. Next is a lot of next now. Okay, data provider. So we have some parameter how to choose and retrieve the data from different platforms. Now, if I speak only concerning the statistical data, we are harvesting data from around 30-35 different data providers. Next, please. And of course, when it's possible, everything is done in an automatic way with the standard and the possibility that all of the providers provide. Next, please. We need to transform and structure and process the information in order to, next, please, introduce to realize from the data the indicators in both in terms statistical or geospatial. Next, please. And after this, they will be stored in a classical database or geodatabases. And after this, we have to manage this raw data, structured data, in order to create visualization. Stop. Yep. Okay, and okay, thank you. And we use two kind of tool. One is a classical business intelligence. We use open source Apache Superset software, and on the other side, the geospatial management system, a geoportal that is done by MapX. And you will see what is MapX in the next presentation. Is an important part of our structure, of course. Next, please. And everything is included in a shell, in a content management system that have a typical structure in order to manage all the different elements. But what is very, very important, we have to take attention that maybe we don't, please, yeah, 1 minute, okay. We don't do this attention in the past is to create a real user interface and design interface using external resource in order to go far than we do in the past. Next, please. I'm close. And we have, so we can incorporate it in this environment, our statistical widget and our geospatial visualization widget. Next, please. And yes, the last, much more important thing, if you don't have the knowledge part from external or internal expert that can work around all the data, you don't have any really platform. So this is very, very important point. Next, please. I'm very close to the end. This is the other platform. Next, please. That for UNEP, as you can see, is very similar. There's something that is changed, of course, the information part. But most of the information was using the same widget. We changed some parameters, the country, and so on. So this is one of the opportunity furnished by the widget. I think I can stop here. Okay.
That's
so
Andrea.
thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Can you just put your microphone off, just in case there's, thanks. So I'll take questions at the end. So we'll just move quickly on to the next two speakers. We have Ken Davis and Pierre Lacroix, who will speak in that order. They're going to speak about remote sensing in support of ASGM policy development, implementation and evaluation. And just in case you don't know what ASGM is, it's artisanal and small scale gold mining. Ken.
Thank you, Stephen, and could please put the slide deck on. So Pierre and I will be speaking, and I also just want to say that we're also presenting on behalf of the Minamata Convention on Mercury Secretariat. So that's our team for this effort and this presentation. Could move to the next slide, please. So Stephen already told you what the acronym we use for artisanal small-scale gold mining, ASGM, but what is it? So I want to set the scene with a few facts and figures about ASGM. Well, what is it? It's gold mining that's practiced by individuals or small groups with a limited capital access to capital and limited production. And even though it's a small scale sector in terms of individual sites, it's actually very widespread and a very large sector in other ways. It accounts for up to 20% of the total global gold production, so it's very significant in terms of gold production. There are 15 million, in fact, probably many more people who work in this sector, and many of them, most of them work in remote areas, in rural areas in developing countries. The sector is very widespread globally. It's in 70, 80, probably more countries, and it's oftentimes in areas with limited economic opportunities in other sectors. It's very often informal, meaning it's not part of the formal economy, lacking, for example, permits or not subject to taxation. And very significantly for us as UNEP and also through the Minamata Convention on Mercury context, ASGM is the largest source of mercury pollution. Mercury is used in ASGM to form an amalgam, a mixture with gold, when combined with the ore or the concentrate or the sediment. That mixture is then heated, the mercury vaporizes, it goes into the air, leaving the gold behind. So it's a way common way to recover gold in ASGM. Next slide. A couple words about mercury. Mercury is a toxic substance, and it has a couple of important properties that make it a pollutant of global concern. It's transported very readily in the atmosphere, so that a source of mercury in one place can have big impacts in many different places around the world. It also bioaccumulates, and so at higher trophic levels, the concentrations of mercury can become very high. So for these reasons, the international community negotiated and adopted the Minamata Convention on Mercury, which entered into force in 2017. And that convention has provisions that address most of the sectors where mercury pollution is released, including, of course, the ASGM sector. Next slide, please. So now I want to kind of transition into this work that we're doing on remote sensing and ASGM, and I have on the screen a few images of some ASGM sites. These are taken from drones, but you can begin to get an idea of the type of patterns and landscape impacts that make some types of ASGM amenable to remote sensing analysis. And I want to say that gathering data on this sector is really important for countries, for governments who are implementing the Minamata Convention or implementing other policies around the ASGM sector. And it's a very hard sector to get data on because it's so dispersed, it's informal. You can't always, there's no registry of miners. It takes place in remote areas. So it's difficult to get data, but that data is critical in having a baseline, monitoring, developing policies, all of that. Field work is traditionally how data is collected, and that will always be a part of data gathering in ASGM, but that's also limited in terms of scalability. And so there's a lot of promise in the use of remote sensing to supplement field data to look at the ASGM sector. There's also promise in artificial intelligence and pattern recognition and the ability to automate some of this the monitoring that can be done with satellite imagery. So the Minamata Convention Secretariat is also working on developing monitoring guidance, including mercury levels in air, biota, and humans, and doing work with specifically on in situ monitoring of mercury in and around ASGM sites. But this effort, which Pierre will now talk about in more detail, is undertaken by GRID-Geneva with funding from the government of Norway, together with the Minamata Secretariat and the UNEP Global Mercury Partnership, looking specifically at how remote sensing can be a useful tool in helping policymakers characterize and monitor their ASGM sector. Over to you, Pierre.
Next, please. Thank you, Kenneth. So GRID-Geneva's contribution was the development of a technical guidance document that aimed at identifying benefits and limitations in using remote sensing technologies to monitor ASGM activities, raising awareness of decision makers of the potential for remote sensing to be applied as a tool for monitoring ASGM, and providing recommendations, guidelines, a framework on the use of remote sensing to support ASGM policy development, implementation, and evaluation. And these guidelines are designed as a supplement to the UNEP guidance document, which is called Developing a National Action Plan, an app, to reduce and, where feasible, eliminate mercury use in artisanal and small-scale gold mining. And this guidance document offers an overarching guidance to countries that are ASGM national action plans for the Minamata Convention. Next, please. In the next slides, there is a lot of text. It's done on purpose to make sure that the audience has a maximum of readable information, because we had a lot of findings to show. The first key findings of this study were the benefits of using remote sensing for ASGM monitoring in terms of analyzing large areas, analyzing back in time, analyzing inaccessible areas, geographical scalability, temporal scalability, combining multispectral information, for example, optical and radar, integrating remote sensing outcomes with other geographical and above all, in situ data in GIS to understand the correlations between different environmental factors. In terms of the increasing availability of processing platforms, of analysis-ready data and tools, and in terms of the fact also that land use, land cover methods applied to ASGM will likely increase their accuracy and ease of use through time. And also it's the same for remote sensing data in terms of spatial and temporal resolution. Next, please. We also found key limitations. The non-technical limitations are the following. Technical competencies are present in scientific communities, but not necessarily in policy agencies, in governmental agencies, or in local mining associations and local communities. So this can decrease the involvement of the local associations and mining communities in the monitoring process and the policy development. So this can sometimes undermine the trust and exacerbate the tensions. And also remote sensing technology used for environmental surveillance purposes can lead to crime mapping. This is a potential huge issue and lead to social environmental disputes. Next, please. Other findings were the identification of between 15 and 20K technical limitations of using remote sensing. We don't have time in 7 minutes to present all of them, but for those who will download the presentation, there is an annex at the end of the presentation with all those key technical limitations. We developed a set of guidelines for ASGM practitioners who want to start with the use of remote sensing, because those are not necessarily the same than the technical expert. We implemented also 4 case studies using remote sensing tools to monitor ASGM impacts on the environment in order to illustrate let's say, the theoretical and academic work that we did. So we did those 4 case studies in Eastern DR Congo, 2 of them, in Peru, Madre de Dios, and in Colombia, El Bagre, in the Antioquia region. We looked at monitoring land cover change and water turbidity over the last 3 years. We use the Open Data Cube technology and the Google Earth Engine technology to use two different tools, and we disseminated the results on MapX, which is an online geospatial open source platform for environmental data. And the URLs are present in the annex of this presentation. And finally, we provided recommendations for different typologies of users, researchers, international organizations and funders, data and software providers, and in the next slide, the government officials and policymakers in ASGM countries. So some recommendations for this last typology of users is how to include GIS and remote sensing tools in their programs for ASGM policy development, implementation, and evaluation, to integrate with local knowledge, to solicit the know-how from local university, to build capacity among local universities lacking technical knowledge, above all, to encourage multidisciplinarity, for example, to combine remote sensing outputs with other environmental information or social or health information and conflict, demography, etc., to involve local communities and mining associations in the elaborations of ASGM policies and programs, to disseminate remote sensing outputs on cartographic media in order to make the results understandable and comprehensive to a non-technical audience, and to pay attention to crime mapping, as I was saying just previously. So thank you for your attention.
Perfect. And thank you for the timing on that. So our final presentation is on ChemOps, and it's integrated guidance for decision-making tools for management of chemicals in Africa. And this is also bridging the science to policy gap. And here we have Pierre Thibelet from the UN Environment Programme. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to be with you this afternoon. And we can go straight to next slide. And I think this project responds very much to the need that was emphasized by both Bruno and Sibyl in their introductory remark. It's really the result of two driving forces driving this project, which is synergy and engaging other sectors. The African ChemOps was financed by GEF. We are reaching the last 2 years of its implementations now, over 5 years. It emanates from a cooperation between health and environment, between WHO and UNEP within the implementations of the Libreville Declaration on Health and Environment in Africa. And it is synergizing three main forces, three expertise, the scientific assessment expertise, economics expertise, as well as legal expertise. All this aims at providing our 9 pilot countries implementing this project, 9 African countries, to better predict, prevent, reduce. It's to equip them with the capacity to basically translate our data and our knowledge into economic sets of arguments in order to generate business plans that will that will justify investments to be made on the priority issues that were identified through the observation. So 3 components: observation, so you get the data from the health sectors, from the environment sectors, in order to facilitate the reporting obligations to the conventions, BRS, SciChems, and others. Once you have these data, this observations capacity is, you start to plan. In other words, you start to prioritize the actions to be taken. And I will explain which tools we provided with that. And once you have this prioritizations, you run economic analysis in order to justify the investment to be made through financing hard interventions or institutional capacity types of interventions. Next slides, please. So we developed a decision-making tools package, which is an integrated set of guidance. It gathers 3 integrated decision-making tools. And as I said, it's really the result of this synergy effort. to substantiate the ability to prioritize chemicals and waste management in the decision-making process and facilitate integrations of sound management of chemicals and waste into national development plans and processes. So there is a component related to policy, governance, and institutional capacity, a scientific integrated information and assessments component with prioritizations and ranking set of indices aligned on SDGs pillars, and in an economic analysis component. Next slides, please. The first, it's the chemical control set of guidance that we developed in cooperation with the Swedish government and CHEMI organizations. It provides 3 sets of guidance, one on national authority for chemicals control structures and funding, and provides concrete information on how to build this capacity. There is one set of guidance on risk reductions tools for chemicals controls, so all the tools that are there, from assessment to legal and so on, and a guidance on enforcement of chemicals control legislations. In order to build the case and the needed investment to be made on this, we also provided information documents that highlights the benefit of these measures. Next, please. So along this legal equipment, we provide the tools to support decision makings with an economic, and this is the first time that we developed really this kind of mechanisms of tools, an economic cost of inactions calculators that goes along with an relative risk vulnerability impact calculators. And all this is put together within a customized data catalog dashboard that is provided by our colleagues from MAPEX. And they have worked as well with Pure Earth and Pan UK in developing the 2 calculators. Next, please. The relative risks and vulnerability guidance documents provide background information on the global indicators that are available. All the information concerning relevant SDGs that are of relevance to chemicals and waste management, an assessment tools to facilitate national compliance with MEAs, and a set of toxicity profiles providing essential information concerning 9 priority chemicals, pollutants, and reference doses that have all been validated by WHO. Next, please. This relative risk and vulnerability calculators, and we don't have time to get into the details today, but they used so Microsoft Excel and assist in determining which site sources of chemicals pollutions to prioritize for risk reduction activities. In other words, as soon as you have all the data available, you need to, and you want to justify an interventions, you need to justify which one, which contaminated site, and we built a balance between the sites, and this calculators establishes a balance between the site and the vulnerability, the populations that are the most vulnerable. Next, please. The cost, the economic cost of inactions calculators, developed by Pure Earth, and its purpose is to estimate the economic cost of chemicals exposures, inputs based on country-specific data and completed by national consultants. What is interesting here is that we are not calling an international expertise that comes up with a stern kind of report, is that we provide really each countries with the capacity to develop their own cost of inactions calculation, cost-benefit ratio. The sources, they are coming from government data, from peer-reviewed literature, demographic data. Of course, as soon as you get into these levels, we're getting short. We can go to the next slide. We have the MAPEX interactive dashboard, so it's the visualizations aspect of this system. So MAPEX is used in combinations with these decision-making tools. Next, please. We have now a site where all the 9 countries features, the dashboard are featured, and it's working quite well. We can use also the calculators into this within this website. Next, please. And this is so the MAPEX, which is the one-stop shop that runs all these various actions that I've described to you already. Now, the next step, which, and next slide, please. Next slide. This is the visualizations of the countries. You can get that more information within the website. This is the results for Senegal. This is the business case. So this is the ultimate result of all these efforts, is to build the business case and have a business plan presented to potential funders. And next, please. This is the same for Madagascar. Next. Looking forward, which is next, please, which is very important. We are aiming at automating this system. In other words, we would like to put in one single system, and this we are looking to develop that with Pierre and his team in GRID. Is to automate this system that from the border officer to the nurses, we can gather all the data, and from there run our cost of inactions and vulnerability index as we want, with regular updating, and we hope that this can be featured within the World Environment Situation Rooms at a later stage. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Pierre. We have about 12 minutes left. I'm going to stay with you, Pierre. You used the word integration about 12 times. So with an integrated approach, what have been the difficulties and challenges developing and implementing it?
An integrated approach, the hardest challenge is not the access to the data. It's not the access to the knowledge. It's the sharing of knowledge. It's to instill a spirit of cooperation between the sectors. It's to overcome the challenges of fragmentations of expertise, and it is really the sharing of data, and how do you share it, and what do you make out of this sharing effort. That is really, I think, the main factor of success or failures of an integrated approach.
Okay, perfect. Andrea, I'm going to come back to you because you talked about human interaction as well and contribution to the platform. How important do you think that is?
I think it's one of the most important parts of the puzzle of the building, the infrastructure of your data visualization. It means that it's really an added value. You can automate, you can go very, very far in the process of expose the data. But if the data are not selected, are not organized, are not described by human for the moment, maybe in a day we can do this with we start to do this with artificial intelligence, of course, but in some cases, I think the human contribution is makes the difference between one platform and another one. It's not only collect the data, but it is interpret the data and put in the right position. So it's likely to be like an iceberg, you only see the external part, and all the interaction, the discussion, the exchange between the expert and the technician and so are something that sometimes is not really visible. Thank you.
Thank you. Can remote sensing be used to undertake law enforcement to detect ASGM and also have actions associated to eliminate it?
Thanks, Stephen. It can, but as Pierre pointed out, this is an area of concern, and I think an area where there can be abuse. And I would say, with this kind of data, with this big data comes a big responsibility, and what the impact, the situation that we don't want is these kind of enforcement efforts being used to criminalize minors, driving them further underground, further alienating them, because in working with this informal sector, that there needs to be a level of trust that's established. So I think there are cases, for example, when there are clearly illegal activities taking place in a protected area or in indigenous lands, that you might use this tool for enforcement. But I would really urge caution with any intervention in ASGM. Anything that criminalizes or forces this already informal sector more underground is probably going to do more harm than good.
And are you actively working with Indigenous communities in this area?
No, we're not in this particular initiative, but there are in some parts of the world there are conflicts where artisanal miners and indigenous groups do come into conflict. Same things happen sometimes on concessions of large-scale mining operations or in protected areas. But we really draw a distinction between something that's clearly illegal and the vast majority of the sector, which may be informal, but would not be classified as illegal, should not be criminalized.
Okay. So we have an Indigenous alliance at GEO. That's why I'm asking. Maybe there's a way to connect some of the activities.
Absolutely, yes, interesting.
Pierre, so we could spend the next 2 hours talking to you because your list of key findings was pretty extensive as well as the recommendations. So maybe just to summarize, we talked about issues around data collection, management and sharing for sustainable management of environmental issues. Maybe just briefly, what are some potential solutions to challenges such as data fragmentation or lack of availability of in situ or ground data? Maybe start with that.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. So yes, there are numerous challenges, but there are also solutions when we talk about digital data collection, management and sharing. One of the issues is that the data can be fragmented in multiple databases, initiatives, in multiple agencies. So one solution is to offer centralized tools, for example, like the World Environment Situation Room, that will act as brokers to stream the data from multiple sources into a one-stop shop of relevant information. And it's also important to realize that at the beginning of the chain, we have raw data, and that the other side of the chain, we have information and something that has been transformed and digested to make it more comprehensive and smart as well. Yes, there are many challenges, but another issue with data is that it is not always interoperable. So it's not the case with remote sensing data, but in other cases, we can find data that are locked down in PDF files in proprietary formats. And the solution, and it joins what Pierre was saying with his automation of workflows. One solution is to develop automated workflows in order to automate the publication of the related environmental information on platforms and to keep this information up to date, because information in the field will change and we need to keep this information up to date. So to automate maximum of change in the workflow. We also need to address this issue to align with international standards. For example, for geospatial data, we need to find a way to be interoperable. So we are promoting at GRID-Geneva the Open Geospatial Consortium standards for geospatial data and the ISO standards for the metadata documentation, the data about the data.
And Pierre, just the human aspects being talked about as well. What about the in-country capacity?
Yes, the in-country capacity is sometimes low. This can be a challenge. So one solution is to train users on how to collect data, to publish this data on interactive platforms. For example, in the case of geospatial data, and we've worked previously with Kenneth and his team at UNEP Chemicals and Waste on building capacity for users, and it comes also through designing focal points in countries to support people gaining capacity. It's also about making people communicate. The technical experts should communicate and work jointly with the persons who are gaining competence and the people who are mandating the projects and the works. And finally, something very practical that we did is to develop the data templates. For example, Excel files with drop-down lists. And for this, we can use different tools. We can use Excel, but we can also use Kobo, the Kobo toolkit, or any other tools that will help users take this information, fill it up in a standardized way in order for different countries or different provinces inside one country to report the same information in a standardized way so that it can be gested and then automated, as I was saying before, and then shared online in a smart way.
Thank you. So standardization, automation, automated knowledge sharing. Pierre or Andrea, in 30 seconds, can you say what you think are the key elements for effective platforms? Off the top of your head, what makes a truly effective platform?
Again, sorry. Yeah, I think it's to establish this cooperation. In managing chemicals and I think in ASGM, if you want to build some effective arguments to the decision maker, you need the health argument. If you just have the environment argument, it might often not be enough. If you have the health argument, it's not enough either. If you have the health and environment arguments in a scientific assessment way, it's not enough. You need also the economic case. You need to tell your decision makers that has to manage a budget and manage, take some investment decisions, to tell him that it makes business sense indeed to manage the ASGM in a decent way, or to manage your chemicals in a decent way, and that it will pay off if you invest on establishing a stronger institutional structure in the country, or if you invest in finding some alternatives in managing gold mining or whatever, alternative to mercury. That's where I think we can best translate our scientific knowledge into environmental actions.
Nicely put. Andrea, your 30 seconds. And you don't need to add if there's anything you want to add. Don't feel obliged.
Only to conclude that we can see on the everyday life, we have more and more data available. So take care to the quality of this data and how we can use, reuse, and share. This is also very important. And in the planning, the platform, data platform, always keep in mind also the who are in the other side of the platform. So the users, they need the possibility to access and really use your platform. It's sometimes something is difficult because we are on the other side, but make this exercise. That's from my side. Thank you.
Perfect. So we have a minute left, and listening to you, I just want to say thank you to everyone for your contribution. And I just want to add, in GEO, in the Group on Earth Observations, we have 66 programs globally. We have EO for Health, which is using Earth observations for health with WMO, WHO, and others. We have GOS4M, which is Global Observations for Mercury, which I think you know about, Ken. We have Digital Earth Africa, which is providing open data for the whole continent as an operational service. And we have the Geo-Indigenous Alliance. So I hope that we can bring some of those together with the work that's going on, because UN Environment, GRID-Geneva, have all been working with GEO for a decade or more. So thanks again for all your contributions, and I think we are bang on time.
Yes, we are. The panel was not able to answer all the questions that we received online that I had shared through WhatsApp, but we will be answering some of these questions on the webpage of this event. And now, with the conclusion of this first panel, it's time to move to the second panel, Big Data and Artificial Intelligence for Environment. And to moderate this session, introduce you to the panelists, I have the pleasure to turn to Stéphanie Choi, who is a project manager at UNEP GRID-Geneva. Stéphanie, over to you.
Thank you, Diana, and welcome everyone to our second session on Big Data and Artificial Intelligence for the Environment. We have a very interesting session lined up right now with three very distinguished speakers. And the discussion will be around how big Earth observation data and artificial intelligence have been revolutionizing the way we generate new insights and information on environmental changes at various scales, allowing us to unlock digital modeling and developing digital replicas of various aspects of the Earth systems. So today for this session, we will have our speakers who's going to talk about Earth observation and geoinformation technology for disaster and climate resilience, looking at how open science can contribute to environmental monitoring, and finally, how AI and satellite imaging could help us monitor aquaculture. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our first speaker, Mr. Luca Del Loro, who is the Chief of the Disaster Risk Management and Climate Resilience section within the United Nations Satellite Center, UNISAT, within UNITAR, the United Nations Institute for Training and Research. So Mr. Luca Del Loro has more than 15 years working experience within the United Nations, and he is currently holding this position within UNISAT and also collaborating with UNITAR. And since 2011, Mr. Del Loro is a visiting lecturer at the University of Copenhagen as well as the University of Geneva. He has co-authored several publications in international journals on geoinformation science and Earth observation applications in disaster risk management. Mr. Del Loro graduated from the University of Bologna with a Master of Science in Environmental Engineering, and he has also obtained a professional master's degree in Geoinformation Sciences and Earth Observation with the specialization in Natural Hazard Studies. So without further ado, Mr. Del Loro, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like first of all to thank our colleagues from UNEP GRID for inviting us to this very meaningful, important event. We have a long-lasting collaboration with colleagues, especially the one in Geneva. So I would like really to thank before to go through my slides. Next, please. So I would like first, especially for those connected from remote, maybe give a quick introduction to UNOSAT, which is an operational program of the United Nations Institute for Training and Research. And then we provide UN member states, UN programs, funds, and specialized agencies with satellite image analysis, as well as with custom-tailored geospatial custom-tailored training and capacity development programs in different geospatial application domains. Our headquarters is located in Geneva, but we are growing. We have an office in New York, and then two regional liaison offices in Bangkok and Nairobi, with presence in the Pacific, Fiji, Vanuatu, and Solomon Islands. We have been recently recognized by the ECOSOC as within a resolution as the United Nations Satellite Center, and in this year and this month, we are celebrating 20 years of operations. Next, please. So when it comes into our operational work, our work is around three main operational pillars here. One is providing training and then capacity development solution to UN member states. Another one is more into operational services to support with satellite image analysis different conflicts, human security, and also image response. And then we are also very active in research and development, where we want to keep abreast of new technological developments, such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, and other new developments. Next, please. Over the last 10 years, we have been strengthening UN member states, UN agencies, but also in the academia with participants of our training and capacity development activities with ad hoc, through training with geospatial information training, and then also applications. Our goal is to leverage new technology, especially geospatial and Earth observation, in different application domains to the countries, and to develop solutions with them to facilitate operational decision making. As shown here, we are now more and more engaging into medium and long-term capacity development projects, where we want to strengthen the use of this technology, especially for countries where for countries that don't have that capacity. And then we have been working a lot in Asia, in the Pacific, and Africa. And I would like to give a next slide to give a quick example of results from a common sense project, which is called Common Sensing. Common Sensing is an innovative project funded by the UK Space Agency, the International Partnership Program. The project started in 2018, and the overall objective was to strengthen climate resilience in 3 target countries: Fiji, Vanuatu, and Solomon Islands, through the use of satellite and remote sensing application. So to address climate challenges, sorry, I'm so sorry. Some water will help. So to address climate challenges of these partner countries, the project consortium made by 8 institutions in the UK, but also abroad, led by UNOSAT, developed a platform, Common Sensing Platform, which provide national stakeholders with evidence-based data to identify climate adaptation priorities and also to apply for climate funds. So the overall idea was to provide those countries, those ministries, with reliable data to apply for climate funds. Just repeating, because it was really important to use the data, but also to understand the priority for climate adaptation. So the platform will be ready in the next few months, and then includes different applications. One is the disaster risk application. Is a spatial decision support system developed by UNOSAT. We use the informed methodologies looking into some national to identify some national vulnerability of the capacity and also the different risk. And then there were also data cube technologies that was developed by the consortium partner Catapult. Next slide. And then, they come up with 14 different products looking at the entire archive of satellite imagery acquired over the last 10, 15 years, or 20 years, especially in Fiji. And we got this example of product that were used in different climate adaptation scenarios to support the operational planning, decision making of the government. Next, please. So UNOSAT, another example is flood artificial intelligence, but I would like just to mention that UNOSAT has an operational service, the rapid mapping service, which provides humanitarian organizations and UN agencies with satellite imagery analysis following major disaster events worldwide. We have delivered from January to September 21, more than 600 products, and then over 95 activation in close to 60 different countries. Next, please. So we have developed to match information and then innovation needs of humanitarian organization and also UN partners. We have been tested and validated and then developing AI-based models over the last few years. We came up with this model for flood detection, which is an end-to-end pipeline that are capable of ingesting over specific area of interest, but over a country as well, more than 100 radar images, and automatically is capable of extracting flood extent. Then we develop also automatic script to bring all this flood extent, the data, the layers, and to generate flood statistics using baseline data available over the specific countries. The tool is now operational in 8 countries because we had to work a lot to validate the model and the results, of course. And then, next slide, please. We tested the tool recently during the Southeast Asia monsoon season. This monsoon brought a lot of massive floods, especially in Nepal, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Thailand over the summer. And then we've been testing the tool to generate flood statistics over these countries. Next, please. So basically, we've been activated by different UN organizations, especially also from the Resident Coordinator Office. And we produced, our typical flood analysis and maps, ranging from impact analysis, exposure analysis, but also with some preliminary reports and damage assessment. But then, the main focus I would like to bring attention on this AI flood dashboards. Next slide, please. So we created and then these dashboards for these countries, and the dashboard were embedded, instead of sending maps or that normally our user can also download from our website. We created this dashboard, ingesting, with the result from the AI model, and then with the statistics, and this dashboard were embedded in the UN website to have a better access, to give better access also to humanitarian agencies in the field. As you can see here, the results are much more easy to be visualized and to be also understood by non-technical experts, identifying, which provinces are more affected, how many people are affected by different admin level, and also the dashboard are capable of ingesting and then feeding into also field reports and then field photos. That's it. I guess that I've done with this quick overview. Thank you very much. Sorry for the voice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deloro. Next, I'd like to invite our next speaker, and that's Dr. Gregory Giuliani, who is the head of the Digital Earth Unit and the Swiss Data Cube project leader at UNEP GRID-Geneva. So, quick introduction, Dr. Gregory Giuliani is a senior lecturer at the University of Geneva, and he is a geologist and environmental scientist who specializes in geographical information systems and also spatial data infrastructures. He also works at GRID-Geneva since 2001, and previously the focal point for spatial data infrastructure. He currently is the head of the Digital Earth Unit. Dr. Giuliani's research focuses on land change science and how Earth observations can be used to monitor and assess environmental changes and support sustainable development. So interdisciplinary is a key element of his work for generating new ideas and innovations in his research. He has previously worked as a GIS consultant for the World Health Organization, as a university tutor in remote sensing and GIS, a developer in a local Swiss GIS company. So Dr. Giuliani has a bachelor degree in earth sciences, master's degree, and a PhD in environmental sciences, specializing in remote sensing, GIS, and SDI. Dr. Giuliani will be talking to us today about his project on the Swiss Data Cube observation using open science for environmental monitoring. So please help me welcome Dr. Giuliani.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good afternoon, everyone. That's a great pleasure to be here today to show you how we are trying to harness the information power of satellite imagery for Switzerland. And in that frame, so I will present the Swiss Data Cube project that is supported by the Federal Office from the Swiss government, and we are really grateful to FEUN for their renewed support for the Swiss Data Cube. So next slide, please. So if we look at this pyramid, one of the key challenge at the current time is to build evidence-based policies. And if we consider data that can be any type of measurement, then if we structure the data under the form of graph or maps, then it became information. And if we contextualize that information, then it became knowledge. And based on that knowledge, then we can build and develop an understanding and hopefully come up with good decisions. So next, please. So we can say that the knowledge can inform us about the limit of the planet and then enable us to take sound decision and help societies to take care of the planet and an efficient use of the limited resources of the planet. So next, please. So to that end, there are many satellites observing the Earth since the 70s. So this is the current NASA fleet of satellite, and they are continuously observing the Earth from the different space agencies. So next, please. And if we look to the one specific satellite from the Copernicus program, so the Earth observation program from the European Commission operated by European Space Agency, the Sentinel-2 satellite, every 5 days it took more than 20,000 images to cover the Earth's surface. So in a year, it takes nearly 2 million images of the Earth's surface. So it's really what we call big data. Next, please. So it allows us now, having images every 5 days of the Earth's surface to really monitor land cover changes in a really detailed manner. So it's a real game changer, this temporal resolution. And in this example, you can see some drastic changes from forest to cultivated area. And this is just a quick example. So next, please. So we are really reaching the point where we can monitor the Earth in near real time. And it's a reality. Next, please. And there are many challenges in Earth observation science. Obviously, as you know, the data volume is enormous, the data variety and heterogeneity, also the scientific knowledge we need to have to understand what data is needed, optical, radar, and so on. Accessing and downloading the data, it's really hard. It's even harder to prepare the data, correct the atmospheric effects, and so on. And obviously, you need some capacities and new training. Next, please. So the big challenge that we collectively have to face is how we can transform this large amount of data in something useful for the decision maker to support evidence-based decisions. Next. So the traditional way we use with the remote sensing data, it's usually, next, please. We identify an area of interest and then we search within many catalogs, petabytes of data across millions of images, petabytes of data, and then hopefully maybe we can find some good images and then we download them, we pre-process them, and then finally, next please, we can do the real scientific work, so developing algorithms to analyze the data. So the blue part of the diagram is the boring part of the remote sensing specialist, and the funny one is in the red square. Next, please. But now with the data cube technology, what we have done, we are storing in the data cube what we call analysis-ready data. So it's data that is pre-processed at the minimum level that enables users to really start doing analysis only. So it means that the scientists can spend much more time in doing science than searching data and pre-processing data. So that's reduced the burden on analyzing the data to the end user. Next, please. So the data cube technology, we can summarize it as a kind of time series of multi-dimensional in space-time and data type of a stack of spatially aligned pixels to be used efficiently and effectively to access and analyze. Next, please. So you can sample, we call it data cube because we can sample it in the different dimensions. So obviously, if the last time step and the last on a given surface, you have a traditional remote sensing image. Next, please. If you aggregate the cube in space and time, you have what we call a mosaic. And next, please. If you look at the variation of pixel values of a group of pixels, then you have time series analysis. Next, please. So if we look at the country level, so the Switzerland, every government around the world have national and international reporting commitments. Next. And they need information that is really synaptic, consistent, and spatially explicit to capture the anthropogenic impact at the national scale. So next, please. So we think that the data cube technology can provide to the users the long baseline required to determine trends, define the present situation, and then also inform in the future. Next. So, and if you look at the plot director of the research from FEUN, there are some articles specifically mentioning the use of remote sensing as a data tool for monitoring the environment at the national scale. Next, please. So what we have done on a mandate we received from the FEUN, together with the University of Zurich and the WSL and the University of Geneva, we built the Swiss Data Cube. So it's a data archive of analysis-ready data containing 37 years of data across the entire country with 7 sensors. So the entire Landsat archive, the entire Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2 archive. And I think two of the main numbers, it's if we consider a pixel an observation on the ground, we have more than 1,000 billion observations across the country. And the cost saving having an open data license, because before we had to pay this satellite imagery, it's something like 10 million Swiss francs. So it's a big treasure to analyze the Swiss landscape. Next, please. So I will show you a few examples afterwards, but just to say that Switzerland, after Australia, is the second country in the world to use a data cube. So we are really a pioneer and leading country using this technology for environmental monitoring. Next. So if we look, for example, at these two lakes, so the Lake Thun and the Lake Brienz in the central part of Switzerland, so you can visually see that these two lakes are different, and especially the Brienz Lake here on the right-hand side, that is less blue than the Thun Lake. And the next slide, please. And the explanation is that there are a lot of sediments flowing in the Brienz Lakes. It's highlighted in red. So if we use an algorithm that is able to assess the total suspended matter, you can directly give an explanation on this difference of the color of the lakes. Next, please. So we use also the Swiss data cube to monitor a small lake at the French border. So it's the Lake Brenet that is quite famous for over these last year of being impacted by the different droughts that we experienced over the last summers. So in 2018, so that's the situation in 2017 over the summer. Next image, please. And that was the situation in 2018, where you see on the southern part of the lake that the lake has disappeared. It was completely dry because of the drying condition and the lack of water flowing into the lake. And what we've been able to compute the water observation frequency. So for each pixel, we compute the frequency. And next slide, you can see basically the dark blue part is the permanent water body, and then all the other colors represents temporary waters. Next. So we use also the Swiss data cube in the frame of the SDG 11 to monitor the accessibility to urban green areas in different cities, and in that case in Geneva. So we use Geneva as a benchmark. So we use satellite imagery to identify all the green spaces across the Geneva canton, and then we model the accessibility to those green areas with a specific model. Next. We're also able to monitor impact of climate change. In that case, this is the Rhone Glacier, so the source of the Rhone River in 1985. Next. And in 2020, you see that the glacier has dramatically receded, and also in front of the glacier, you see a lake appearing, showing that the glacier is completely melting. Next, please. So what we have done also with the Swiss data cube, we've been able, using 20 years of satellite imagery, to assess the snow cover changes across the entire country, and we realized that more than 4% of the permanent snow-covered area during the winter season has lost 4% across the country, and the region where snow is rare has increased by 8% across the country. Next. And the last example is related to the drying conditions. So this is just an example in summer 2014. So you see that the vegetation is quite green. So it was a rainy summer. And if you can compare it to the next image in 2018, so you see that the image is a bit more brown. And if you compare it with 2003, so the next image, you see that the vegetation is even more brown. So it means that the vegetation is dead. And using this satellite imagery, we are able to assess and quantify the impact of this drying condition. Next image, please. So what we have done, we have computed an index that allows us to monitor the water content of vegetation. So next image. So that's the situation in 2014. And the situation in 2003, so you see that the water level has decreased in the vegetation. And what we have done, we have built a time series of this observation across the entire country. Next. So you see that slowly but surely, using the 35 years time series of Landsat observation and the annual mean of this NDWI index, you see that there is a small decrease in terms of vegetation water content across the country. We've been able to disaggregate by biogeographical regions these values. Next, please. And you see by these biogeographical regions, the impact of the drying condition, but basically all the country is drying. Next. So to finish the presentation, there are many other applications. That was just a few of them, but you can read the different potential applications we can develop on top of the Swiss Data Cube. Next, please. But just to say that we are really committed to support also the national digital strategy at the national scale, improving the management of natural resources, stimulating research, providing an effective monitoring mechanism. Next, please. And we are also aiming to achieve this reproducible knowledge by exposing all the part of the application, not only the data, but also the code we generate, also the result, the tools, and so on, so that we can, next, please, build the trust with the decision makers so that they can trust the data we are providing and the result of the scientific research at the highest level of the government. Next, please. So to that end, we build what we have called the Swiss NVO database. So it's a fair, compliant environmental database, so you can find all the data products provided and generated out of the Swiss Data Cube. Next. So, and everything is open, not only the data, but also the code, the publication, and the application, and even the educational material. Next. And recently, well, basically last week, the effort also of making all these things open, we had a publication together with colleagues from the WSL and the University of Zurich, and obviously GRID and the University of Geneva into the Nature Scientific Data, highlighting the work we are doing with the Swiss Data Cube. Next. And just to say that the vision is really to harness this information power, and we are aiming by the next 3 to 5 years to be really a national data infrastructure supporting not only the fund, but all the research institutions across the countries and even potentially the SMEs. Next. And to finish, just to say that I really think that the Data Cube technology has the potential to enhance the scientific accountability and credibility and to build that trust with the decision maker and the shared knowledge, because without that, doing science can be really difficult. Taking sound decision can be problematic, and even envisioning a sustainable development can be really, really complicated. And it's a provocative slide, but definitely, if we look at what Bolsonaro said about deforestation observed by satellite, they are not lies at all. Next slide. And with that, I'm done. So you can follow us on the different social media and the website. And I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Giuliani, especially ending us with that very thought-provoking piece there. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our third speaker, Dr. Denisa Rodila, to present her project on using AI and satellite images for agriculture monitoring. So Dr. Denisa Rodila is a software engineer and a project manager in environmental sciences within the European projects at the UNEP GRID-Geneva. And she has a PhD in computer science and environmental sciences, specializing in parallel and distributed computing in large-scale environmental applications. She is currently involved in different European projects, and her research interests include distributed computing and intelligent systems with focus on cloud, cluster, and service-oriented technologies, large-scale applications, big data, and artificial intelligence. So welcome, Dr. Denisa Rodila.
Thank you very much for this presentation, and good afternoon to everybody. I am pleased to present you today one of the projects in which we've been working at GRID-Geneva, which is aquaculture monitoring using artificial intelligence and satellite imagery. So it was a short project, but our mandate was to try to find the best way in which we could monitor the aquaculture structures using new technologies, including AI and satellite images. Next slide, please. So just to introduce you a bit to this world, the aquaculture, or the fish farming, how we call it, it's a controlled process of cultivating aquatic organisms, especially for human consumptions. It's really similar with agriculture, but instead of livestock, we will have aquatic organisms. We can find it all over the world. in different formats and in different structures. And the most common ones are the one inland, which can have a rectangular structure, or the one in water, which are mostly circular structures. But nowadays we can find it integrated with different other cultures, such as the rice culture. And as you can see, some of them can be detected using satellite imagery, but others are more difficult. So next slide, please. Why are we interested in this topic? Well, it's simply because it supplies more than half of the world's seafood for human consumption, which is huge. That was in 2019, and by 2030, it is estimated that it will arrive at 62%, which is a huge percentage, as you can tell. A high record that was attained in 2018 was the production of more than 114 million tons in live weight, which is huge. So that's why the purpose of this study was to try to monitor in a uniform way, even at the regional level or at the global level, to monitor the structures and to be able to quantify a bit this consumption of seafood. Next slide, please. So our focus on this project was to try to analyze both inland aquaculture structures and in water. For the inland aquaculture structures, which are mostly rectangular, we have focused our analysis on the Gulf of Guayaquil in Ecuador, because it's one of the major world producer of shrimps. And for the circular in-water aquaculture structures, we have focused our attention in Greece. Next slide, please. The technologies that we've been used in these projects are the TensorFlow, which is an artificial intelligence library. It's a really known and used library. For the computing platform, we had a partnership with Descartes Labs, which is a company in US, and they were providing us not only the computing platform, but also the technical support to continue with this project. And for the training data set, we have used first Sentinel-2 imagery, which is a 10-meter resolution and has a 5-day revisit period. This was okay, but we realized that we could use even better data. And for this purpose, Descartes Lab provides us access to spot imagery, which is 1.5-meter resolution, so it has a high resolution. But unfortunately, the temporal resolution, it's not so high, so it's 1 per year. Which is a bit challenging if you want to do analysis and to train on a short period of time. Next slide, please. So our biggest challenge in this project was to gather the training data, which is a very time-consuming process, and the deep learning algorithms usually require a large amount of training data. And especially in remote sensing, this is limited because we have cloud issues due to cloud cover, cloud shadows, as I said, the temporal resolution or the spatial resolution can differ. So one of the solutions for this that we found interesting was to try to explore the transfer learning techniques, which is, I will not go into details here, but basically you train an algorithm using some set of data, and then you apply it on another set of data, in which you don't have as many data as you would wish for. So the training data, the annotation to create the training data set was a challenging process and time consuming, as I said. We have depicted there the steps. So first you have to compute some indices. After that, you do the image segmentation. You also have to do some manual editing to be able to, based on the color or of the shape, and also to select the polygons that you would like to annotate. So we didn't find a way to automatically do this process. That's why it requires manual intervention, but yeah, maybe in the future we will find a better way to be able to speed up this process. Next slide, please. So here I added some examples of the training data that we use. This is on the Gulf of Guayaquil. We have managed to delineate 1,023 polygons features in this image for this training data set. In this case, we use Sentinel-2 images. Next slide, please. And we also used, we created another data set on a mosaic of spot images. Considering that we only had one image per year, we actually decided to perform this annotation on a mosaic of images. And this was the result. So we used both of those data sets in training our algorithms. Next slide, please. And for the AI algorithm, we chose to go with a UNet classifier architecture, and we chose the depth 5. So this was a basic structure. Of course, we can play around with the levels of the architecture and to see different results. But unfortunately, the project was only a few months, so we didn't have the time necessarily to play too much. For this scenario, we use binary cross entropy as a loss function and Adam optimizer. I don't know if it's too technical for some people or not. I will not go much into details, but just to have the details on the AI structure that we use. Next slide, please. So the experiments that we have performed, as I said, we focus mostly on the inland aquaculture structures. And in this case, we tested 3 scenarios. And we played around with annotating the data on Sentinel-2 and on spot images, and also training on Sentinel-2 and on spot images to see the difference. And we also played around with other parameters, especially the tile size of the images, the input images, because this played a really important role in the obtained results. And for the in-water circular structures in Greece, we have only performed 1 experiment because unfortunately, due to the reduced visibility of those structures, considering that there is no difference in color in water, the results were not very satisfying, but still, maybe with more training examples, we could arrive at better results. Next slide, please. So, considering the time, I will not have the possibility to explain all of the use cases, so I chose just a few of them. In this case, on the left side, upper corner, you see that was a model prediction at a certain point. I give them the coordinates, and the tile size was chosen at 64. So you see that the detection is really clear and it's really nice. On the right upper corner, you see an image in which we had issues with the clouds. So you see that when we have clouds in the image, it's very difficult to detect the structures of aquaculture. And for that reason, we chose to apply that on a mosaic of images. And you see on the lower image that we managed to reduce considerably the detection of fish farming. Next slide, please. So those are our best results that we managed to get up for the rectangular inland aquaculture structures. On the left image, I think that was the most accurate result that we obtained, and that was training on Sentinel-2 images and executing or applying the algorithm on spot images using a tile size of 64. That was the case 2 scenarios, and the case 3 scenario on the right side still gave us good results, but as you can see, the river is considered as a structure. This means that so we didn't manage to introduce also negative examples in our training data set, and that's the result of this lack of negative examples. But still, it's quite promising, as you can see, and considering we could do this over a large area, it's quite nice, the result. Next slide, please. So this was the experiment. I wanted to just to mention it, the one that we've done on circular in-water aquaculture structures. And we managed to annotate those structures. But when we try to apply it to different points, next slide, please. On small scale, on a smaller scale, we managed to detect, not very precisely, as you can see, it's still missing some of them. But still, we've managed to detect them. But when we try to scale up, it was a disaster. And this is basically because of the really low visibility on satellite images of those structures, because there is no change in colors, so they are really not visible even with the eyes. It's quite complicated to detect them, even at 1.5 meter resolution. So next slide, please. The conclusion, I want to keep the time. So the conclusion, we tried to analyze, and we successfully analyzed the inland rectangular structures, aquaculture structures in the Gulf of Guayaquil. And the results were really, really good. We have managed to also analyze and realize that it's still very difficult with the circular structures in Greece. We've used this platform, which was of great help and support for us. We've used Sentinel-2 and spot images for this. The project was a short project, only a few months, but it allowed us to create a prototype. And we realized that if we give it a bit more time, we can even scale it up at a larger scale and improve the algorithm a bit more. But the results were quite nice in the end. So that's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And I would like to open up the floor for questions. And that goes to our audience online as well. The floor is open up for questions. I might start with the first one myself, if there's none from our audience here yet. I think the first question, perhaps I'll go back to Mr. Deloro. With regards to the tools that you're developing at UNOSAT, for example, the Flood AI tool, how do you see that being integrated with existing systems at the national level already for perhaps a better disaster response mechanism?
So thank you very much. Thank you very much for the question. Actually, we've been testing now and then operationally, because our main purpose is, of course, collaborating and then in terms of research development. But ultimately, we would like to use operationally any solution for the benefit of our UN member states and also for our partners. So that was very important exercise, to use this tool operationally during the monsoon season. But we are now currently working and try to increase the number of countries. So we are testing, and validating also the algorithm that now only use Sentinel-1 data. We are trying to now expand and then also increase the number of sensors for water extraction. And then also we are, trying to, especially for the dashboard, of course, one thing is the extracting and delineating the flood extent, and another one is generating statistics. So that's why we need also to have a great collaboration with the countries, with the UN country teams, to collect as much as possible baseline data, and also not looking only on the population living in flood-affected areas during an emergencies, but we would like to try to go beyond and then building on collaboration with colleagues here, also looking at, of course, the response, but then taking a bit the disaster risk reduction at all, and then also using this, integrating with more reliable data for also risk, vulnerability, and coping capacity, and then looking at the risk dimension of things, so to improve also preparedness.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your answer. Again, I think if there's any questions here from the audience, feel free to turn on your mic. I don't see any takers. Then I'm seeing that we have 5 more minutes. I'm going to jump right in and ask my question to Dr. Giuliani. So I found your description and explanation on the project really intriguing. But I am curious, how would that compare to something perhaps more well-known like the Google Earth engine that I think it's something that perhaps it's a more, I guess it's really the thing that it's an introduction to this having data imagery on the Earth, you know? So I'm wondering how would that compare, and if you could provide us your insight on that.
Yeah, thank you for this really nice and interesting question. I think, in short, I would say that the Google Earth Engine is a fantastic tool, but I think it's mostly interesting for the research purposes. I mean, it's giving you access to a planetary scale data infrastructure, so you can do your own analysis. But if I look at the Swiss scale, I would say there are many issues, and the first one will be the data sovereignty, meaning that the Swiss government, if we take the position of the Swiss government, they will not share some of their sensitive data with Google. It's no question at all with that. So it means that at the end, we have to build our own national capacity to harness the information power of satellite imagery. So that's one of the reasons we also build the Swiss data cube. Obviously, we are not here to compete with Google. We are not on the same line, I would say. But then the second also argument of having this national capacity is that then you can build and use your own specific data sets. You can bring your own data set that are not available probably on the Google Earth Engine. And if you look at also at the quality of the data that is provided by the Google Earth Engine, you can realize that from time to time there are issues with the data. And if we compare it, for example, if I think about Landsat 5 data, in Google Earth Engine, there are many issues that we do not have in the Swiss data cube. So we provide this kind of Swiss level in terms of data quality also. So it means that we enable researchers and other end users to have this really good quality data for working with satellite imagery. So I think that's also another argument of building this capacity. And then obviously it's also a way possibly to enable small and medium enterprise at the end, once we scale up at the national scale and provide the access to the Swiss data cube to basically virtually anybody in Switzerland to build their own businesses using satellite imagery. So I think that's extremely important also, and that's all really building national services.
Thank you for your answer. So I see that we have 2 more minutes. I'd like to forward a question to Dr. Rodila. So you've mentioned that this is a pilot project, and you've obtained some very interesting data there. I'm wondering what would that mean if, let's say, the opportunity would come if you're to scale up this project. What does that mean if we're able to, let's say, go beyond what you've been able to collect through this project? Maybe you could share some of your insights with us.
Of course, thank you for this question. It actually helps me to tell you even more of our project. And I think we are ready to scale it up. We have the platform to do that. So we have the computational power. The only thing that would still need is to fine tune the algorithm that we have developed as a prototype. And that means to train it with even more examples, and maybe to be more varied in the examples that we give. So to choose specific corners in the world with different maybe structures of fish farming, and to try to train that to see the accuracy of the algorithm. And after that, there is nothing stopping us to scale up even at the world level, because we have the platform for that. As I said, we have the technical capability. The only thing that it's missing is the time to fine tune this algorithm. But we are waiting for this opportunity for sure.
There we go. Well, thank you very much for all your interventions. And that's it from us from the second session. And Diana, I'll pass the floor back to you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. It's now time for a short break. So for those who are connected online, we will keep the connection on, and we will restart with the third panel at 4:20, which is, so we have a 30 minutes break, which is a long break. We encourage everybody who is online to also go have a coffee, a tea, relax, do something different. And we are looking forward to have you all back at 4:20. And so enjoy the break.
Exceeding the planetary boundaries is placing the Earth system on the trajectory of the Anthropocene, a period of less predictability. So can we identify the responsibilities of individual countries? How can we monitor these essential environmental variables to monitor in real time so that we can look at the trends on climate change and biodiversity? So today, I first would like to give the floor to Mr. Hai Dao. He is the head of Metadata and Socioeconomics Unit in the GRID-Geneva, UNEP. He is an adjunct professor at the University of Geneva and the head of the unit of UNIP GRID in Geneva. He holds a postgraduate diploma from International Institute of Aerospace Surveys and Earth Sciences, the ITC Enschede in the Netherlands, and a PhD in human geography from the University of Geneva. He led 3 studies on planetary boundaries at the Swiss, European, and global levels. And he was the leader and expert in several EU-funded projects on territorial cohesion. He contributed to the risk analysis of the UN Global Assessment Report series. So the title of his presentation is Planetary Boundaries. Please, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Sibyl. Good afternoon, everyone. So indeed, there is only one planet, but there are several boundaries. Next, please. So the concept of the planetary boundaries was expressed in 2009 by a group of scientists who defined a set of 9 planetary boundaries within which humanity can continue to develop and thrive for generations to come. Here I'm citing the authors. So the idea of the planetary boundaries is really a planetary focus on the stability and resilience of the Earth system as a whole. That's the idea. So the 9 planetary boundaries are climate change, biodiversity loss, freshwater use, land system change, chemicals, ozone, atmospheric, aerosols, ocean acidification. I'm using nicknames, and also names are changing through the different evolutions of the concept. So there was this first publication in 2009 and the second one in 2015 with slight changes, but the idea of 9 boundaries still remain. So this is kind of a constant now that is accepted. Next, please. So there is a policy interest for these planetary boundaries since they were published, in particular for Switzerland since 2013 at least. It is cited in the Swiss position on a framework for sustainable development post 2015. Also at the European level, you can see that different words are used, but the idea is the same, living well within the limits of our planet. We also see that there is a balance that we have to find between environmental dimensions and social and human dimensions. So in this context, GRID-Geneva was commissioned for 2 studies. So the first one was a study on Switzerland. The idea is to see how this global concept could be operationalized at the level of a country, Switzerland. And interestingly, like the Swiss Data Cube, we were also among the first, also the second country in the world, like Switzerland was the second for the Data Cube, to do this exercise to translate the global concept at the national level. And we had a second study in 2017 to see what this concept would mean for Europe. So we were very happy to be funded by FON also for these two studies, and EA for the second one also, who was the main funder. So next slide, please. So in a nutshell, the approach, I'm trying to simplify very much what we did into four main steps. So the first step is to, I would say it's like a literature review, scientific literature review on what the science says about these limits, what are the indicators, how we should measure these 9 boundaries, and if global limits can be identified. That's the first step. Then the second step is to see, as I said, what it means for a given territory, so at the sub-global level. So we started with a country, Switzerland, but we can also do the same for a group of countries like Europe. Then the third step is to understand what is the actual or the current impacts of these territories. And here I will show you that we used a specific approach called a footprint approach to understand also the impact that occur outside of a given territory. And then fourth, we combine the limits and the impacts to understand the performance of the country and to identify priorities for action. So in the two studies, we use these steps. Next slide, please. So about this, the first one I will skip because it would be a long story, but taken for granted that we have these indicators and limits for a given planetary boundary. Now the question is how to allocate a share of this global limit to a country. So there are a number of allocation principles that can be applied. The basic one is equality, meaning that every single human on Earth has the same right to the global budget. You see, for instance, that the European population represents 8% of the global population, and the Swiss population 0.1% of the global population. So that's a simple key to allocate. But then there are other considerations like individual needs related to age. We know that we don't have the same needs when we are young or old. Development, sovereignty, capability, responsibility, and so forth. So there is a whole literature on that. And in our studies, we applied all these principles. For the Swiss study, we applied only one principle, which is responsibility. Responsibility from 1990 to 2100. And for the European study, we tested, in fact, a series of principles. We did up to 36 calculations to test the sensitivity of this aspect. Then next, please. Environmental impacts. We know that a big share of our environmental impacts occur abroad due to the imports and the trade, especially in our developed and open economies. So this is an example for Switzerland. These figures are aggregated value on the environmental impacts of Swiss residents. And what we see on this chart that over the time, the total impact is quite stable. The part occurring in Switzerland is decreasing and the part occurring abroad is increasing. Now we can say that almost 3/4 of the impacts of the Swiss residents occur abroad, which is a huge amount. So it's absolutely necessary to have this footprint data to take into account these external impacts. Next, please. And then I will just finish with the results of the European studies. We published this summary table. What you can see in this table is the range of the allocation calculations that we did. So in the yellow part, you have the minimum and the maximum and all the calculations we did. And so below, on the green part, you have the values below the minimum share, and above the maximum share, you have the red part. And what we see in this graph is that for climate change ocean acidification, we are well above the limit in Europe. For freshwater, the situation is still okay, considering our approach. And we have identified that for the nutrient cycles, nitrogen and phosphorus, and the land system, Europe is starting to be above the limit, is above the limit. So what is interesting for the European policy is to see climate change and ocean acidification are already well tackled and known. There is the Green Deal policy, but now we can see that nutrients and land are also a very important topic, and they could be tackled, they need to be tackled in a way that they can maintain this the stability of the global system. So one entry could be, for instance, the food system, because the food system is related to these nutrients and to the land and to biodiversity also, which is not in this table. So this kind of table can give a hint on where and how to approach the problems in a more integrated manner also, not just one planetary boundary by one, but if we can find like a food system, we could be able to tackle several planetary boundaries at the same time. So I will stop here, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. It's actually quite worrying when you look at it, because one question that I would have very quickly to you, it's a graph from 2011. Is there a more recent graph of that? Because we can then look at the evolution of this.
No, this is something we have to do. Also, we wanted to focus on specific sectors, economic sectors, because now we know that some sectors or even some companies are producing, have big impacts. So this is something that we have to focus on now, definitely.
Thank you very much. Now, I would like to invite the Professor Anthony Lehmann for the next panel. He's from the Institute of Environmental Sciences of the University of Geneva. So Professor Anthony Lehmann is an ecologist who works on species distribution and hydrological modeling, ecosystem assessments, as well as food-water ecosystem nexus to address sustainable development. He coordinated the FP7 EnviroGrids project on the Black Sea catchment, concentrating on the use of hydrological modeling outputs to inform decision-making and build capacity in Earth observation, data sharing, and processing. Anthony is now coordinating the H2020 Era Planet /GeoEssential project, which ran from 2017 up to 2021 on the development of geoprocessing workflows to link Earth observation data to environmental policy indicators through the use of essential variables. He is associate editor for the journal Environmental Sciences and Policy and will be organizing the INT-ECOL 2022 conference in August 2022. Where will that be?
In Geneva.
In Geneva.
International Association of Ecology.
Thank you. And he has also co-edited a MOOC on ecosystem services, which is available on the Coursera platform. And he's going to introduce today to us the GeoEssential project highlights. Please, Professor Lehmann, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here and present to you the outcome of this GeoEssential project, which is a typical product of the collaboration between the University of Geneva, the GRID, and the FERN, because it was done in collaboration with many people at GRID and with the support of the FERN, and in fact, the funding of Switzerland in this case. So yes, it is. Next slide, please. About the aim of the project was to demonstrate the usefulness of the concept of essential variables to build concrete workflows to inform policy making from data to policy indicators at different scales. So we worked on looking at this concept of essential variables, which I will explain, looking at what is missing. We produced a special issue to explore these gaps, and then created within the group on Earth observation a community activity to strengthen the use of this concept within Earth observation. Technically speaking, the workflows were built on a knowledge base with different technical components, virtual laboratory, data cubes, the dashboards and story maps to present the outputs. And we demonstrated it through 3 workflows, one on biodiversity and ecosystems, one on extractives and lights, and one on Nexus food, water, energy work packages, with each of them having several workflows. Next, please. So I'm not sure if you are familiar with essential variables. I will start on this right lower corner to try to explain between Earth observation, the data that we observe from satellite or on the ground, to the indicators that we need for policymaking. There is a lot of things that we can explore, and more, and then the potential to get lost and to every year decide to change what is measured, monitored, and so on, so that the fabrication of indicators for policymaking might not be, in fact, on a sustainable base. So each domain has to decide what is essential to measure. It started with the climate domain here, the atmosphere, with the people from GCOS defined the essential climate variables very well to understand what is essential to know about the climate system. Then the people from biodiversity started also define the essential biodiversity variables. And then on the Earth system part, the natural part of our socio-ecological system, global socio-ecological system, now people are starting defining the geosphere, the essential geological variable, if you like, and also efforts in water domain, in the ocean, in water, and now also I just learned today on the cryosphere as well. So we are quite advanced on this side, but we still need a lot of work to define what is essential to measure more on the socio-economical sides of system in activities like agriculture, energy, or urban development. But the work has started. And these are the main topics addressed by GEO. And we believe that each community should define what is essential and make sure that these variables are stabilized and monitored through time, so that we can better and more easily build information system at various scale for informing decision making. Next. So I will present you the voice band that I had to run this project with the different work package leaders, starting with Paolo Mazzetti from Italy, the CNR, who was in charge really of the knowledge-based and developing this platform, allowing to call the VLab, allowing to bring all the information, the codes, the data, and connecting it to the GEOS platform to be able to next to create those workflow here. Next slide. Yes, those workflows here that I want to highlight that are run once everything is in place directly on cloud on cloud infrastructures. Next. So the second member of our boys band is Joan Masso from CRIAF in Spain, who has been working for a long time on essential variables and developed graphical visualization to see how different policy indicators are related to different Earth observation systems. And we connected it in this case also with the SDGs, the goals of the SDGs, and also the essential variables, so that you can navigate into the huge amount of information already available in different information systems. So that's part of our gap analysis. Next. Then we had Daniel Spengler from the Potsdam Institute in Germany, who explored the available platform, cloud platform, to analyze the data coming from essentially from Copernicus Earth remote sensing data, and did a comparative analysis of the benefit of these different platforms to port those workflows on the cloud. Next. So yeah, we were not very good at selecting women in our project. We continue with Aydin Nayamir from Germany again, Senckenberg, Institute for Biodiversity, was in charge of the first workflow sets that we had on biodiversity and ecosystems. And here with an example that we did ourselves from the region of Geneva, developing the so-called green infrastructure. That is a policy need at the Swiss level, cantonal level, but European level as well, and trying to see what we really need to measure according to which essential variables to finally be able to define in the landscape what is a priority to be protected, the green infrastructure. Next. And we continue with the first member of GRID that you recognize here, Pierre Lacroix, collaborating both at the university and UNEP-GRID, mostly at UNEP-GRID, developing the MAPEX infrastructure that we seen already. And the project allowed to further improve the interoperability of this MAPEX platform and test it also with workflows on mining activity, as he presented earlier. And there was another part in this work package that he led on light trends analysis globally with a platform developed to follow Earth's night light emissions anywhere in the world. Next. So the third set of workflows was led by Jan McCallum from IASA in Austria, and concentrating on projects that were trying to connect different domains, so-called nexus approach, food, water, energy typically, but you can add climate in front, you can also add ecosystems with it. And the idea being that there is no way we can solve all these environmental issues looking at them independently. We really have to find synergies across them and find best solutions for several things at the same time. Therefore, the nexus approach, which was here demonstrated by colleagues from Germany, Jülich Institute, with an application model that allows to look at monthly agricultural water stress level across Europe and presented it in our dashboard in the project. Next. Then we come to another known face, Gregory Giuliani, again from the GRID, who was leading the work package 7, gathering the data from the other 3 previous work packages, workflows to build up dashboards, again, as we have seen earlier, to present the data coming out of these workflows in understandable ways. With here an example from showcase that we had on land degradation, addressing the need of the indicator on Sustainable Development Goals of 15.3.1, and with application at various scale, global, European, and national scale, to look at the pixel level, national, country level, or state level, the level of land degradation according to this workflow on our dashboard. Next. Then we had a work package, as usually, on outreach dissemination. I would emphasize here the work we did with GEO and in communicating and building this essential variable community with presentation during different events, which are recorded and still visible on their platform. Also, the fact that with the Swiss Data Cube, with Ukrainian work, with other partners from different countries have been using the concept of essential variables and promoting it at national level. And then, the MAPEX, also other platform that were part of the project, have been also promoting the concept. Next. So finally, we have a female in the team, thanks to the work of Denisa, also from GRID, you've seen before, who was managing, in fact, the project, and that allows me to emphasize also the interest of collaborating. It allowed her to also not only be an excellent data scientist, but also get skills for managing large projects like this one, and wishing us in her statement to find also the essential in us. So next. So if I was summarizing the what we are trying to achieve there, if we look from the geo perspective, which is addressing primarily the SDGs, the Sendai framework on disaster risk reduction, or the Paris Agreement, which will evolve now, they are basing all these on incomplete set of essential variables right now, and each domain is kind of picking up whatever variables and data they find, not necessarily the same from one policy to another. What we would like to see is a great effort from the geo community to really provide all the essential variables from the Earth and the socio-economical domains, so that every policy can build on the same set of variables that they are sure will be still there in 5 or 10 years' time, and that we could also apply this in other scales. It's also a question of making transversal analyses feasible, like the Nexus approach. The SDG is the great example of a Nexus. So next. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, G. There's quite a lot going on, and for me, that was one of the point is there's a lot of data. The instruments are much better. I could say I was a scientist 40 years ago, and that didn't exist. So I was wondering, how do you choose the right variables that you are going to work with? And I think the work you're doing is also extremely interesting. So now I'll go to my next to the next panelist, Mrs. Karen Sudmeyer-Rieu. She is a senior advisor, disaster risk reduction in the United Nations Environment Program's Disasters and Conflicts Program in Geneva, Switzerland. Karen has over a decade of experience researching, teaching, and publishing on the topic of ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, ECO-DER. She's currently coordinating a global project on ECO-DER, which includes the development of a postgraduate course and 2 massive open online courses. She's also a scholar of ecosystem-based landslide management with expertise from Nepal. She holds a PhD in environmental science from the University of Lausanne, Switzerland, and a master's degrees in international development and forest ecology from Switzerland and the United States. And her presentation is entitled Scientific Evidence on the Role of Ecosystems in Disaster Risk Reduction. What do we know? Please, Madam, you have the floor.
All right, thank you very much. And in the wake of COP26, where we heard a lot about the need to reduce deforestation with new commitments towards planting trees, well, we need to know, well, where should we invest our efforts into planting trees, and where should we focus attention? So my brief presentation will really be to give some answers to that, and also answer some of the questions that were in the concept note, such as how can we monitor ecosystem services regards to trends on climate and biodiversity. Ecosystem services as no-regret solutions, but what do we know about their capacity for reducing disaster risk? So what I would like to present are in 2 parts, really, is, go ahead on the next slide, please. The first one is a tool which was developed by colleagues in this room, GRID. We have our dear colleagues, Andrea, Pierre, we have Bruno, and we have Pascal, which is very handy because if there are any questions, then I'll obviously direct it to them. So if you go to the next slide, please. Now, the objectives of opportunity mapping for ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction. You may ask, why opportunity mapping? Why this title? Well, really, it's to visually demonstrate the interface between ecosystems and human exposure for a range of natural hazards and ecosystem types, to identify potential areas for ecosystem conservation and/or restoration in order to reduce exposure to these hazards for the highest number of people. So it's really to find opportunities to scale up investments in ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction and actions globally. Next slide. So this looks like a very simplistic overview, but there's a lot of science and thinking behind this. So this is the basic idea, is that this mapping tool overlays data on population, where do we find people, Where are they exposed to these 4 major sets of hazards? And what are the type of ecosystem services, these 4 major categories, which would provide some kind of connections, right, between forests and tsunamis, tropical cyclones, landslides, flooding, yes, but perhaps a bit less between mangroves and landslides, right, for example. You may find in some cases, though, that mangroves and flooding may have some interactions, and that could be dealt with at the national level. So what was developed, I think over almost 10 years ago, was the first iteration, was really to have a global perspective and a global overview and bring together these different layers. So just briefly, next slide. I think you might need to click a bit here. Go ahead and keep clicking. Why don't you stop there? Okay. So what we have is a relatively simple idea, and I guess the complicated ideas that are presented in a simple way are the best ones, right? So the idea is to bring together population data, again, with global data on hazards, which where GRID really is the world leader in this field through their preview data set, which has been updated over the years, together with other global data sets on land cover, where there's a selection of relevant ecosystem classes and a calculation of the proportion of ecosystem coverage for each hazard exposure cell. Okay, so in other words, we've got population, we've got our hazards, we've got ecosystems. So we have these layers that are then brought together with an algorithm and calculated at a 10 by 10 kilometer scale grid globally. So what this brings us, why don't you go ahead and click a bit more, and there's some things, stop right there, please. So what we have there is we have globally a grid around the world. We have 10 by 10 kilometer scale. We have either in dark pink, for example, areas where we find that there is high exposure to a certain type of hazard, and for which there is very little, I would say, degraded ecosystems or little ecosystem coverage. It may not be degraded, but it might be a drylands area where there is very little ecosystem coverage, where we would recommend there as an area to pointing towards suitability for ecosystem restoration. Areas in dark green might be areas that have good ecosystem coverage, but where there's a lot of population that might be exposed to certain hazard, okay? And this gives us a dark green. I'm going to skip the 2 other points because we don't really have time for that, so keep clicking, please. Next, okay. So these are the data that we have right now and that our team, we're working on updating because some of them are getting a bit outdated. So you can see here the 4 different types of ecosystem data, which come from other sources, mainly WCMC, and then the hazard data, for which GRID is really the world leader. And we're working on updating some of the global data sets. So we're looking at now in this next generation opportunity mapping, also how to incorporate climate change scenarios for certain types of flood risk modeling, for example. And we're also now looking at how to apply that to certain countries. I'll come back to that in a minute. Next slide, please. So this is what it looks like. A very exciting global map, again, in dark pink. Can you click on the next, please? Where dark pink shows areas where there's low ecosystem coverage for various reasons, which might be a good, I would say, at least communications piece, and working with a member state and saying, look at your country, there's so much pink. Is there something we can do about that? Or if there's areas, next click please, areas in dark green. Look, these are areas that really deserve conservation because there's a lot of stakes. This is an area that's highly exposed to certain hazards. And this is for flood exposure, flood coverage globally. Next slide, please. So this, we've had some national applications. So at the global level, okay, it's an interesting conversation piece, but really to be able to use this tool for planning, we need to get down into more detail. So actually, the Ministry of Environment of Colombia got really excited about this tool and developed their own version of it with higher resolution data, where they developed an environmental degradation index and were able to play with our parameters in a way that was very exciting and with a different application. So we're seeing some applications now in other countries as well. There's the next slide, please. Here's a tailored approach for Sri Lanka for decision-making on disaster risk reduction. This is actually being used. This was developed by IUCN Sri Lanka. and is actually now being used in 2 GAF projects as a way of decision-making on where to invest resources on improving ecosystem coverage for disaster risk reduction. Next, please. So behind opportunity mapping and in terms of being able to better understand, well, what really is the evidence? Next slide, please. What really is the evidence for ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction? Well, we set out, a group of us, including Pascal here in the room and 26 others, just published this year in Nature, an overview, 20 years of scientific literature on this topic. Next slide. I'll just give a quick teaser and then hopefully you'll look up the paper. But basically what we found is that there is quite a lot of evidence, I would say especially strong evidence on the linkages between vegetation on steep slopes for various types of mountain hazards, and a lot less so, surprisingly, actually, according to our results, for coastal. So this is point. There's also a lot of data. There were a lot of studies on urban areas, and a lot less on, for example, drylands areas. So it just mainly pointing to some of the gaps in the literature. There was a lot from the north and a lot less from the global south, which is in special great need of this type of research. Okay, next slide. And just last part of my presentation is really looking at the challenges. Next slide. Challenges, evidence-based, more is needed. We need performance standards. We need guidelines for hybrid gray green DRR designs. They're very localized. How can we get to a little higher level performance standards and guidelines for green infrastructure, especially for hybrid? Integrated risk management is a huge challenge, but it needs to be out there. Risk-sensitive land use planning. There is a growing amount of evidence and experience, but it's still very dispersed. Opportunities. Keep going, please. Digital technology, that's why we're here today, right? So there's a lot of opportunity there. There is a green wave. Greening of cities, sponge cities in China is becoming a huge deal, but we're not really sharing the lessons learned from that. And the climate change urgency is really pushing innovation. We should take that advantage of that opportunity with increasing funding. Last slide, I can't help but promote our massive open online course. We have over 50,000 people registered and almost 10,000 that have completed our course. So it's free, it's open, and it gives really good ideas on how you can take action and become part of the solution. Thank you. Last slide. Next.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. Well, yes, the graph might have looked simple, your table, but there's a lot of science behind, and it is true, as you know, biodiversity is very high on the political agenda at the moment. There was climate change, but that was this year, but next year is a biodiversity year. So I do hope that will link also far more biodiversity to the services it actually offers to human beings. But obviously you have a lot of success with your course. So I think I might also actually pop in sometimes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Markus Böhm. He's a scientific assistant for digitalization in the Federal Office for the Environment. He studied computer science at the University of Dortmund in Germany. And he moved to Switzerland in 2001 and worked for 17 years for Microsoft as a strategic advisor already for the federal government of Switzerland. And after that, he became the lecturer at the University of Lucerne, teaching machine learning and digitalization. And he moved to join the Federal Office for the Environment this year in his role of scientific assistant, and is responsible for the topic digitalization. So his paper is entitled Environment 4.0, Simplified Data Sharing. Please, sir, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much. And if we talk about Environment 4.0, I think about it with how can we use digitalization to help the environment. And to be honest, before talking about the big, bold things, we have to go and make our homework. And this is what every project which we today heard has in common. We have to think about how do we get the data. And maybe we have to rethink about how we share data. And this is what I want to talk about in the next few minutes. Can we have the next slide, please? So this is a common approach in nearly every project. You have some parties. In this case, we have 3 parties, the federal office and 2 cantons, and they want to share some data. And you can repaint the image on the next slide. I just changed the images on country level, and so we have the same project on the global view, and I could paint even more countries, even more cantons, but I was too lazy to do it, and you can simply see that it always gets messy, even with 3 parties on the table. Can I have the next slide? Because no one talks about it that honestly. I think one person in the room, Pierre, when he talked about the GEMOPS project, I saw some kind of Excel sheets there. And when he was asked about the problems, he said the mindset of sharing is a problem. So yeah, we all are faced with these kind of projects. So you have some database in the background, you copy the public part out of it into some Excel sheet and you send it around, and that's because it's so easy. But after that, it doesn't, it's no longer easy. It gets very complex very soon, because you send it to every party, and I don't send it to an organization, I send it to a person. What if the person changes? What if the role changes? Can I be sure that everyone on this community is in sync, has the latest version? And yeah, I think you all know these problems. We don't have to go deeper there. So next slide, please. We asked ourselves, how can we do better in this kind of scenarios? And if you now think, okay, they're thinking about a central data store, please stay with me for some more minutes, because that is not the solution. The idea was, yes, in the first place, to use some kind of central store, which is called a linked data store. But first step for us. So we take this store, we put our Excel sheet into this store, and this gives us the opportunity to share the data with all the other parties. They can access the data if they like. They can export it in their Excel format, so it's not a big thing for them. So it's fine for us. But this is not the main idea. The first main topic, which I didn't want to make this talk too technical, but the main topic behind is that it's web-enabled technology. So the store is accessible by web technologies. And who invented it? It's Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the web, who invented the HTML. And when he thought about how can we share documents, he also thought about how can we share data. But you all know, you can't imagine, I think, a world without web servers. And I ask you, why can you imagine a world without data service? So why do we love the idea of sharing documents, but why are we so constantly not sharing data in the same kind of way? So in this case, you can use a web browser to connect to the linked data store. You can send a query there just by using web technologies. And of course, nobody would use a web browser, but you can use any kind of application, because every application nowadays is web connected. And so you can send your query there, and then you get the data back. Next slide, please. So the idea is that not only we, but every party on the table switches to a linked data store. So instead of putting everything in one central store and asking everyone to agree on one standard, everyone could use their way to store their data, but then we can work together, because this is the magic of the word linked in the linked data. Next slide, please. The idea is that if you send a query to one of these database servers, you can, inside the query, reference other data servers. So you can say, please give me the data from Germany about air pollution, but please connect it with the French air pollution and with the German water data. So different data stores, as long as you can find some similarities where you can combine the data, and then you get one result, which you see on the right side, one result coming from different stores, and that gives everyone the flexibility to work with their own data. And as soon as you have your data published, you can work with this data. Next slide. So we did this in a project. And if we talk about the pros and cons, this is definitely a cons. The name Umweltdatenkiosk is not the best one. It's an internal one. It's a German one, and it's hard to pronounce for non-German speaking. So we have to do better. When we launch hopefully we will launch in some weeks, we might have another name for this, but at the moment we don't care. We have 3 pillars in this project. The first pillar is a tool called Cube Creator, and the essence of this is you give me an Excel sheet and we convert it into linked data, because it was the main problem. People don't know linked data. It's a steep learning curve, and with the help of this Cube Creator tool, you take what you know, an Excel sheet, and we convert it for you. And then obviously we have the linked data store, and then we have as a third pillar the visualization tool, where we say, where we give you the opportunity to have a first glimpse at your data so you can get first ideas what's in it. Next slide. So at the end of the presentation, if you are honest, you always have some things like the good and the bad, and I called it the vision and the reality. So what did we want to build and where are we now? Next slide, please. So the first vision was that we bring the idea of the web to the world of data. And the reality, this technology I present you here is more than 10 or 15 years old, but it never took off. And I have no clue why. The only reason I can imagine is that it's not so easy to understand. And our hope is with these kind of presentations, and therefore I'm very happy that I have the chance to talk here about and to make this even more prominent technology. Our hope is that more and more people go into this, because this technology is consider of web servers. One web server is nice, but the total of all web servers, this is astonishing. And this is the same with the data. It's nice that we have a linked data store, but if everyone in Switzerland would have one, this is great. So, and the second thing is with the Excel tool, we might make the entry level even more easier. Next slide. The second point is we started with a visualization tool because we wanted to give this project some kind of visual. And if all people working with the tool, they love this visual, and they all come back to us and ask for more and more and more. And I fear a little bit that we lose a little bit the context of the linked store and make a next graphical tool. So our hope is that we educate people to use existing frameworks, existing graphic libraries. We want to share Python notebooks or Java applets or whatever, where we say, look, this is how you can connect to the data and now use an existing framework and present the data in a way that you want to. With that, my 7 minutes, I guess, are over, and I leave some time for open questions. And my takeaway is, if you have the next project, please look at the linked data. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe a question to you. Are you going to invite data to get into your cube, or how are you going to publicize actually your new approach?
Absolutely. I asked my boss if I'm allowed to put my email on the last slide, and he said, yeah, go for it. So if you have any idea or question, just come back to us. We are happy with everyone who is reusing our platform, but you don't have to. You can build your own, and even that you can ask me.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dow, there are 9 boundaries that are adopted, but in those boundaries, for example, waste is missing, which is also a pollutant and a problem. So how is the choice made, please?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's really the base of the planetary boundaries, which focus on the Earth system as a whole. So as such, waste or noise or energy, which are classical topic of the environmental policies, they don't jeopardize the Earth system. So if we energy is tackled through climate change or acidification, but as such, they don't play a role in the global Earth system. So that's why it's a complementary approach. In fact, it's a global equilibrium of the system that is at stake with the planetary boundaries.
Thank you very much. I have a question for Mr. Lehmann. So what is your vision for the future of the essential variables that are so important?
Well, I guess the vision I tried to summarize in the last slide, if you remember, that every community define its essential variables and not only define them, but make their related data available in platforms such as GEO or others at national levels or elsewhere. And so that in the end, we have an easier way for all these people, scientists here, building workflows to move from the data to the indicators and faster access to the data recognized by each community as being relevant for building indicators, and that we don't end up with different policy using different data sets and at the end somehow disagreeing among themselves. So it's a huge task, but at the same time, it's kind of necessary given the amount of possible data sets available. And we, in the beginning of the project, 4 years ago, the reaction from the community itself was rather reluctant. In fact, climatologists had started and didn't really like the idea that other people also define essential variables. It was enough if the climate was doing it, but the biodiversity did it, and then the concept became was taken by other communities. And now, I see that we cannot stop it. The different communities are doing it. And we hope we have, in fact, a GEO week next week. We will have an event talking with all the representative of all these domains to try to have a common understanding of what is essential variables and how to go forward in mainstreaming them.
Thank you very much for this explanation. I have a question for Mrs. Sudmayer-Rio. When you define the best ecosystems for offering the best opportunities to protect human populations, when you give actually the opportunity for investments or even probably put some money bound to it, how much it would be to protect, do you also actually provide the cost for inaction when you do this?
It's a very good question. I think something we need to consider for the next iteration of opportunity mapping. Now, we are actually looking at how we might include cost-benefit analysis, and we're also in discussion with the World Bank, who is leading in that direction, and it's definitely part of the decision-making toolbox that decision makers need to have in order to make decisions on whether to, and how to invest in hybrid or in green infrastructure. So it's a very pertinent question, and I think it's up to us scientists to look into how to do that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much to the four panelists. It's been very interesting. I have a conclusion, but I don't think I can. I do have the time for that, so I'll hand over to Diane. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sibylle. And now it's time indeed to move to the fourth and last panel of our day or half day. Building environmental knowledge together is the theme of this last panel, and I have the pleasure to turn to Jörg Balziger, who is the director of the Institute and Hub for Environmental Governance and Territorial Development at the University of Geneva, who will be moderating, facilitating this session and introduce the last speakers. Jörg, over to you.
Thank you very much, Diana. Thank you indeed for inviting me to moderate this fourth and last panel, which is a great pleasure because it brings together two people I've already had the pleasure with of interacting this morning in the context of the advisory board of GRID. we've heard quite a bit already about collaborating together in the context of many, if not all, of the projects that have been presented this afternoon. But it's not as if collaboration happens just like that. We know that collaboration is necessary. We know that we have to work in interdisciplinary teams. We have to make sure we can collaborate at the interface between science and policy. But how does that actually happen? So I'm very glad to be able to have Alex Caldas and Pascal Petuzzi talk to us specifically about collaboration, building environmental knowledge together, and we'll hear a lot more about the World Environment Situation Room, which is really a key pillar of this partnership that is GRID. So I will in turn call on the two presenters. Alex joins us from Nairobi, I think. Yes? You can hear us?
That's correct.
And
Joining
we
you
can
from
hear
Nairobi.
you. Very good. Thank you. Alex Caldas is Chief of the Country Outreach Technology and Innovation Branch in the Science Division of UNEP. He has a long and distinguished career, both as an academic and as a practitioner. He's chair of the UN Geospatial Network, which since his coming to it has worked to strengthen the coordination and coherence of global geospatial initiatives across 37 agencies of the UN system. He's a member of the Data Governance Group of the UN Secretary General. He's worked for the European Union, African Union, NATO, multiple national governments. He's been the chief of e-government for the Portuguese government, and he has published as an academic, where he's been a researcher and associate professor for more than 15 years. Alex will talk to us about generally data strategy and partnerships. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, colleagues. I'm sure at this hour, you should be tired already on this fantastic event of the Science Day with GRID-Geneva. A big thank you for the invitation. Let me put it bluntly what I think. I think partnerships is the nutcracker for everything that we have been discussing, from data to environmental action. If you don't have solid, robust, sustainable partnerships, you don't crack it, basically. So if you don't get anything else from my short presentation today, get these as a fundamental lesson learned on evidence-based learning on action, okay? Partnerships is the nutcracker of any possible data strategy to put together the data for action and environmental action, not only environmental, socioeconomic, and humanitarian. Let me go to the next slide, and I'll go through the slides very quickly. We learned more in the last couple of years at the UN Environment, but more generally in the establishment of partnerships. We learned more. We learned that there are three fundamental keywords. One is integration. The second one is impact, and the third one is partnerships. The big thing is that if you cannot have any one of these if you don't have the nexus among them. So they are interdependent, interlinked. To give an example, partnerships are at the very root of the infrastructure that is needed to make it work, but they need to have an incentive. Every single partner who is a partner in a partnership needs to have an incentive. And usually it has an incentive if the partnership has integration and has impact. So the same reasoning can be done on the other way around. You cannot have integration without impact and without partnerships. So I think the three-dimensional architecture is fundamental for understanding everything else. Let me move to the next slide. That's why basically the common agenda of the UN system and the Secretary General has put forward recently is bringing many pieces together, the data strategy with innovation, with the behavioral science, and with foresight even. So you have to bring together different constituencies, different stakeholders to make things work. Otherwise, it's empty, it's not going to work. I think this idea of the partnerships with multiple stakeholders is an ingredient, is the blood, the nutcracker of the whole thing. Let me go very quickly on some examples of impact that prove the case. We have been struggling a lot in putting together this World Environment Situation Room and bringing so much variety of contents. So with the velocity that changes at the speed of big data, with the volumes of data that change. One fundamental keyword is integrating, is interoperating, is making sure that things work together. That's why in the next slide, you have an example how we're trying to crack it, is to bring all these different actors together in order that we have multiple demonstration and use cases that prove the model. That really is about, in the next slide, you can have, is bringing together a variety of types of data, of different people, of different organizations, of different nations as well. That's what we're doing with this demonstration of a variety of partnerships that we're putting together. I don't spend much time on the next slides, but basically the next slide, we have categorized data in different segments and different channels. The most critical thing is in the slide after this one, which is why we are doing all these to get to action. And interesting, I'm sure that we've been debating along the lines. What we find out is not enough to put together the data and to make it available and accessible in a data platform like the World Environment Situation Room. That's at the very left corner, at the very bottom line of things. But then you have to make sense of the data with some information. And the example of land degradation is a good example impacting on people, place, and planet, where you need to have indicators, SDG indicators, potentially related to get information out of the data. And then better than that, you want to have knowledge, a knowledge platform that brings together pieces of information and makes sense of the information, producing data analysis, producing reports, producing assessments, producing knowledge, okay? What is the interesting, innovative lesson learned that we got in the last couple of years? That's not enough, because if you do that only, going from data, information, knowledge, you're being constrained by doing predictive analytics and doing foresight, by establishing scenarios, but making the data relevant for different scenarios. And one good example we just, unfortunately, humanity just faced is that the SDG framework was not prepared for the humanity catastrophe or the crisis or the pandemic, because a single external event like a pandemic has provoked a complete disruption of our plans, our models. So what I'm trying to say is that making sense of the data through knowledge is not enough. You need to establish foresight. You need to establish scenarios building. You need to establish different versions, different pathways in order that you can make sense and actually support action on the ground. And that's the model that is behind what we're doing. Let me just, we are testing these models and these methodologies. In the next slides, you can see with a number of countries already. Basically, they concentrate in the global south, which is good news. And we have been testing through the common country analysis and the data profiles for countries with 38 countries around the world in the 5 different regions. But also have been using the EC country fishes to establish country profiles and to go in detail to the analysis of which kind of data is relevant for a country, for a country priority, for a country development. Let me finalize. I don't want to take more than the time that has been allocated. Let me finalize how is all of this possible? So if we move to the next slides, even to the next one, how is all of this possible? It's only possible because of partnerships. In order that we have a reasonable, reliable, accuracy or timely platform, or quality verified platform, or accessible, we could never achieve that without partnerships. And just as it is today, the World Environment Situation Room at the very beginning of its journey, let's say this way, as a data information knowledge platform on the environment, we have already established 24 partnerships. These go all around the world. They include the backbone of our initiative, which are the GRID centers, including GRID Geneva as a great hub for the World Environment Situation Room. GRID centers are global resource information database centers. These include data centers or GRID centers that go from Arendal, Warsaw, Sioux Falls in the US, Radi in China, and the new comings, hopefully, on the global south, in Brazil, in Nairobi, in the Pacific. So basically, they include the GRID centers. They include private companies. I can see the remote sensing partnership with the Descartes company in the US that brings together advanced remote sensing analyses to the World Environment Situation Room, but also the IBM data analytics, also Google Earth Engine, also, of course, Esri geospatial ArcGIS technology. So basically, a combination of partners from the private sector that are part of this partnership, but also, of course, the UN system entities, from the UN Geospatial Network to the Statistical Division, etc., citizen science associations, and other international organizations. Altogether, we're talking about 24 partnerships, 24 partners that support an initiative like this. My main conclusion is, yes, we can leverage data for action, but we have to have first integration and interoperability. Second, we have to make sure they're having an impact, and impact is measured on people, places, and planet. Our major stakeholders are countries in the UN. They have to have an impact. And last but not least, this will never be cracked without the nut of the partnerships. One final word: how partnerships don't work. Partnerships don't work if the partners don't have an incentive to participate in the partnership. Each and one of these partners need to have an incentive to participate, needs to have a business model, in at least an expectation model, that is able to convince a partner to be part of the partnership. So most lesson learned: no data for action if we don't have partnerships. Partnerships is the nutcracker. Secondly, a partner is only a partner and sustainable, and a partnership if it creates the incentives for the partners to belong to the partnership. Thank you very much for the opportunity again, and a big cheers to the organizers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. Very impressive to be able to bring such a diverse cast of actors together to produce knowledge and information on the environment. It's my pleasure now to hand over to Pascal Peduzzi, who needs no introduction. I will make one anyways. Pascal Peduzzi is the director of GRID-Geneva, of course. He has a PhD and a Master of Science in Environmental Sciences. He coordinates the implementation of the World Environment Situation Room, among many other things. He's also in the lead of the Global Sand Observatory Initiative. He is also a part-time professor at the University of Geneva in the Faculty of Sciences, very well published, has been a lead author in the IPCC, and directed several global assessments, including on disaster risks. And Pascal will talk to us about the World Environment Situation Room, and under the heading New UNEP Data, Information and Knowledge Platform.
Thank you, Jörg. Next slide, please, Harvey. So every story should always start by once upon a time. So once upon a time, I was at the steering committee, the board of the Global Climate Observing System representing UNEP. And there was all these scientists who were observing the climate and had all these climate variables. They knew exactly what was the level of CO2, what was the temperature of the ocean, what was its acidity, what was the ozone hole. They knew all these kind of variables and on top of them. And I thought, how come everybody doesn't know of that? Because it's very important that we can access real data and that we can get them in real time and see what's going on. Because most of people, I think, they are dreaming. They think that things are not moving that fast. But in fact, in terms of climate, we know we have only 8 years to reduce by half our emissions to keep on the 1.5 degree pathway. So things really need to move very fast. So the idea of the World Environmental Situation Room is to gather from all these data providers, next slide, please, and bring this information to a level where we can actually monitor what's going on in planet Earth. But, next, We don't want this. We don't want a planet and just watch this planet decline year after year. I've been doing that with remote sensing, satellite imagery are getting more and more precise, but what's the point in watching deforestation at 1 kilometer resolution? Then we do that at 30 meters, and now we do that at 10 meters, and now we do that at 3 meters. We still watch deforestation. So I don't want this. So we need to find a way where data can actually not inform us on decline, but show us the pathway, that it's a narrow pathway to sustainable development. So next. So here is a very complex way we do it, and it has to be complex because I need to justify why I'm spending so much money in this system. But basically, if you keep on the last line, it's connecting the data providers to the partners. So the data providers provide data. That's what they do, and that's why they name data providers. But data, most people do not know how to use it. You receive a satellite imagery, what do you do with it? So this is where the partners come into play, and it's very important to put this partnership together. So Alex just provide this huge effort that we do in putting together one global partnership for transforming this data into information and knowledge. So with these partners, we are harnessing the data, transforming them in appropriate information, and then we bring them into the UNEP data information and knowledge platform so that everybody knows that this is authoritative data. It's not random data that you put keywords on your Google and you find those data, because then you might have good data, you might have not good data or not the appropriate one. Here we make sure that the data you got from the World Environmental Situation Room are from authoritative sources, that they've been stamped, if you want, to be the official indicators that we are using for a process. So official indicators to support this policy, to support this multilateral environmental agreement, like the Kyoto Protocol, the Montreal Protocol, the Minamata Conventions, and so on. So make sure that this is the right data for the SDGs, this is the right value. And we want to have that in real good time, not all data that are 4 years or 5 years old. So we are managing here the documents, all the publications of UNEP, all the reports, which are knowledge material, the statistics, the indicators, national statistics, in-situ statistics, and geospatial data, which could be GIS, also in situ or from remote sensing. And we manage that in a simple way so that people can access them to support the member state, to support the different policymakers and the conventions. And then they have the duty to make then the relevant decision for the actions. Next one. So the partners, you've seen that, it's an impressive set of partners, but we still need to expand in the global south. We would like to, and I see Brazil here, we would like to make a partnership with INPE, so invitation is there. We are discussing for doing that with the Geo Science Australia. We want to restore a big center in Nairobi. We want to make all the centers in Africa, like the Observatory for the Sahel, or someone in West Africa. We had partnership in ICIMOD in Nepal, brilliant for all the Himalayas and so on. So we need to expand a little bit on those partnerships. So that's part of the effort. We will not do that alone. Era of big data, you need big partners as well. Next one, please. So the platform has to be reactive and all kind of responsive design. So if you are someone in Australia and you want to know what was burned during the 2019-2020 forest fires, you want to know where it was burned, what kind of vegetation was burned, you should be able to zoom in. So we've deployed this MapX application where you can access this information. If you are on a mobile phone and you want to know what is your quality of air you're breathing, well, you should be able to zoom in your suburb and know exactly what is the kind of air quality you have. And right now in New Delhi, they closed the schools for 1 week. So I took that example. And if you are a father or mother of kids, you want to know what is exactly the air quality. And you should be able to know that in your real time, not the one that was 4 years ago, but the one that is right now. And we also would like to create those physical situation room where we can use that in exhibitions and in conferences for people to get inside the data and really get, wow, okay, that's what we can do. This is what we can see, and try to understand the data. It could be also used by experts in a crisis situation to really look at all the data in one go. Next one, please. So this is the first is what are the needs? So UNEP, we're not here to support all kind of data. We want to support the UNEP mandates. And the UNEP mandate is about doing assessment of the quality of the environment, about environmental foresight, about monitoring the state of the environment in near real time if possible, working and supporting all the divisions, the 6 divisions of UNEP, the regions, people working in the different regions, and with them the countries, supporting the monitoring of the progresses made on SDGs and MEAs. And finally, also having all these UNEP projects, because that's one of the problems, people are losing data. Next one, please. And you can make 6 click, because then I'll avoid to go this thing. Thank you, Harvey. So first of all, we have to archive data. At the end of a project in the past, and it's still the case now, people change job and the computer gets lost, and then the data is still in the hard drive and you've lost the data. And we cannot afford to lose information about the environment. So the first thing is to archive data, but not archive in a way that no one can access it. Otherwise, what's the point? Archive in a way that is analysis-ready data that you can interrogate, you can access, you can visualize this data. Of course, if it's sensitive data, we lock them and it's only protected by password for people who have access to that. But most of the time, we have open access to all the data. Then we want to have automatic update and live data, because with big data, you cannot have an artisanal mode where you are taking one data and you make it in a nice graph and next one. It's not possible. So we have to mass process those data so they are automatically turn data into information product. I mean graphs, I mean through interoperability. So this is what we've been doing. And we need a centralized access. People have many platforms, they don't know them. Even UNEP had many platforms, and even me, I didn't know how many platforms we had in UNEP. So it was important that we had one entry stop. It doesn't mean that they can stop their data, not at all. They can keep their data platform, but having them integrated, so we find them, having keywords, we can find those platforms. And that's the easy search and interrogation. It's key. If those platforms of UNEP are not connected, how do you want to search them in one tool? So we give them a home so that it's a clearinghouse you can find and connect this data. And then people have problems accessing some data formats. Not everybody's got fancy software, so we need to make sure that through web application, they can open all the standards data. So we do that for them. We have selected software that can open statistics, remote sensing, GIS. Should not be any problem for anybody who's got a browser. He can access the data because he doesn't need to have installed software. And that was a problem with many of our staff in many countries as well. You give them GIS data and they don't have GIS software to open them. So we have to make things easy. And then from data to information, straight away, this needs to be automatized. And that's also a service that we are providing. Next one, please. And you can do 6 again. So we start with the search. So those were the needs. So we implemented a search tool with ontology. It will be able to search in different languages, the 6 languages of the United Nations. Full interoperability means that you are connecting to the data providers. So as soon as there is a new data available, it is up to date on your platform. Visualizations of graphs, tables, maps, and story maps and dashboards. So we make it also nice visual for people to understand the data. It should speak by itself. If you are struggling what this graph is saying, it's not a good graph. So we have to make nice visuals. Possibility to interrogate the data, to query, and also to have really using cloud technology that it's fast for data processing. And next things is coming to be processing. So maybe some people would like to make some online analytics. We have not yet allowed this possibility, but it is feasible. The technology is there, no problem. So this is for, if needs are expressed and resources associated, then we can do that. Next one, please. So you can make 4 clicks. So initial concept was 2018. Yes, thank you. Then 2019, we start to run surveys and interrogation. We wanted to understand what was the need. So we run surveys. We had bilateral discussion, trying to frame what is needed. Then we start the development 2019. From the period 2020 to 2022, we are adding content and features and tools. Now we are ready to launch it at UNEA, after UNEA, at UNEP at 50. So UNEP is celebrating its 50th anniversary next year in early March. And this is when we will launch the platform. It is already online. You can already, and I will show you how to get there. It hasn't got all the services we want. There's still some bugs. So 2022 and 23 will fix this and make it really fully operational in 2023. But already now it is functional and you can access many of the data. Next one. So how do you access that? You go to UNEP.org, the official UNEP website, and if you click on publication and data, you will find the World Environment Situation Room right integrated into that. You can also directly type data.unep.org and you access the World Environment Situation Room. Then you can navigate through topics, for example. We have the climate change, biodiversity and pollution, but many others on disaster risk and so on. You can access by SDGs, you can access by regions and countries. We have feature stories, we have the knowledge repository and so on. So classic navigation, but also on top right, you have this button where all these component of the World Environmental Situation Room can be accessed. And you also have the normal search where you just put your keywords and you want something about the emission gap report or something. Next, please. So with the search, you will be able. Next, please. Yes. Okay, now it is good. It's good. So with this, we can, for example, look at the air quality, which is currently ongoing in different places. So you have access to at the suburb level of data, and you can access the exact values. This is one of the applications that was very successful. We depend on that from data stations, and this we are connecting the data. But next one, please. But we need countries to put more of those stations if we want to know what's going on everywhere. Next one, please. And we also have environmental statistics. So we developed this GEGS Life tracker, and that was also financed by Switzerland with different interface. With cartographic statistic interface, you can check the data completeness through time and through countries. You can do the profile of conventions, what are the data needed for each convention. You can track the progress doing trend analysis. You can see the synergies between SDGs, different conventions or environmental themes, or you can make a country profile. Next one, please. So this component is still need some layout, but no, next, yes. There we go. So here you can access that by through our World Environmental Situation Room, by thematics, by SDGs. Let's select one, for example, on clean and affordable energy. Then you can select a country. You can do that through the map interface, or you can do that by selecting the name of the country. So in this case, I think it was Sweden, and you can see progress. Then you can select this by conventions. We can look at, for example, the HE target. I just selected that one because it was the first one, but chapter by chapter, you have indicator, you select the indicator, you get the value through time. It's available globally, but also country by country. So if you are interested in a specific country profile, in this case, I choose Kenya as a headquarter. You get all kinds of variables. We have 400 and something statistics about the environment on indicators that we can select, and you can search them themes by themes. Then if you are interested in just looking at keywords search as well, because you don't know, you're looking for a very specific indicator, you can search by synergies between, we look at the HE target, for example, but could be any other convention and an SDG, and you see what are the interactions, those indicators that are common to those SDGs and convention. Or you just type a keyword, and I think here we just type fish capture, and we look at how the total fish amount is being collected, and you can look at that from country to country. And I'm selecting one country in this case. I look at Japan, and you see a kind of a collapse of the fisheries there. So the data tells there is a problem here in terms of fish. And next one, please. And once you're there, maybe you want to access the data. So you click and you say, I want to download that as an Excel file, as Marcus was saying. Excel is still useful. And we can get the data. People can open it because most people have Excel. So we give them in a way that it is feasible for them to access the data and do their own graph if they want, or just having the value on their computer. Next one, please. So what are the data the reason why we do that is because we want to have authoritative sources. We do not want people to rely on any data they find on internet. We want people to use the official data that have been selected by the conventions, the indicators, the SDGs, or the projects. We want this to be accessible to all and open. We don't want to wait for a big GAFAM company to do a data platform, but then you have to pay for accessing the data. So the data should be open for everyone. It's got to be transparent on how they are processed. So there's a methodology behind, there's a selection on the quality of this data, and long-term commitments to ensure predictability on the provision of the services. So it's not there just for a few months. We have invested on several years, and World Environmental Situation Room is now the new data platform for UNEP. Next one. And the big data is also coming with big challenges. So we need to find the resources, financial resources, but scientists as well for running this global service. So this is a constant battle to find appropriate resources. Connecting all these data centers and to transform this big data into good quality information, and connect all the information to action with positive impact and places people and the planet. Because as I say, this is not only about accessing the data, it's really about supporting the policies and the decision making in the countries and on the ground to make a positive impact. So thank you very much. That's I could say a lot more, but that's already a short introduction to the World Environmental Situation Room. And please do visit data.unep.org.
Thank you very much, Pascal. Year two, it's impressive to see all that is already possible, even though the launch is only 5 months away, 4 months away, the official launch. I will take the liberty of asking you a question first. I like the way you started with once upon a time. I'm tempted to respond same 25 years ago. I was working at the Forest Policy and Institutions branch of FAO, watching deforestation, thinking about what kinds of policies and institutions could be put in place to counter that trend. I wouldn't argue that there were platforms at the time to do the state of forests analyses that FAO did, but compared to what was available then, it really is impressive what is available today, and yet we're still watching deforestation. So I wonder, I mean, you mentioned there are several platforms already. How do you see the weather as a platform that can make a difference?
Yeah, thank you, Jod. It's true that we have many data platforms around the world. And if we are like us, data scientists, we are living with data and we do that every day. So we know where to turn to. And when people were asking me, oh, do you know where to find this data? One of my team will know, oh, yes, go in this and get the data. But if you are not a data expert, how do you make sure where you want to go? So, how do you make sure that this is the right data that you need for your assessment? And so not only we are a data center, we are UNEP's data center for analytics. So we know what is the data that are needed for the UNEP mandate. So we want to make sure that people are using the right data, not any kind of data they find. But we do connect with good data platforms, so data platform from FAO or WRI or other data platforms. We are connecting them to interoperability, so we make sure that we are not duplicating something that is existing. But what we are providing is an authoritative sources. When you go to the World Environmental Situation Room, you have the assurance that you are looking at the right data officially used for following those processes, be on SDGs, on several conventions, or the things that are validated by the countries. So it's very important that we work with validated information, especially in this time of fake news, where people go on Facebook and Twitter and they think they know that climate change is not happening. And so it's important that we give the right information that is from the authoritative mandate that has UNEP. And also it's important for UNEP to be equipped with modern tools, because UNEP has a huge mandate, a very large responsibility. And if we are not equipped with modern way to crack the nutcracker that Alex was talking about, then we won't be able to do our job. So it is important that UNEP is equipped, like other UN agencies, to do their mandate with the right tools. And digital transformation is one of the priorities from the UN Secretary General. So we are also following that track on making sure that UNEP is well equipped for this next era of big data.
Thank you, Pascal. Question from the audience, Otto Simonette from Zoe Environment Network.
Thank you. I'm some sort of a veteran in this business. I think I worked at GRID Nairobi in the late 80s. And I have a little bit of déjà vu, what I hear now. I think I'm very much impressed how this field is evolving. But what bothers me a little bit, I think it's probably supply driven, the whole thing. We talk a little bit about policy making, policy, science policy dialogue. But when I see these tools, which are, none of them is quite 100% finished. And I'm some policymaker somewhere and I want information, I probably won't go to the weather. I don't think so. So I just wonder, what are you doing to make sure the other end, the demand side, gets this data? A good example, for instance, is the IPCC, which is of course a big machinery on its own. I think what they're doing is targeting policymakers much more directly than finding raw data somewhere in a maze, and you don't know, even if it's official data, you don't know how to deal with it very often. I mean, it's both question to Pascal and also to Anthony, because Anthony mentioned this decision-making interface.
I think it's very important to have the right data for the right use. And for example, we address the needs from conventions. So if you look at the Barcelona Convention, they've got 26 indicators that are set by the convention and agreed by the member states. And those 26 indicators need to be followed across time so that they can report on the quality status of the Mediterranean and see if there are progress made according to the decisions. So in this case, we are supporting the Mediterranean Action Program, helping them to place this data on the ground, on the platform, and for people to watch progresses. Also helping them to create this data, because, for example, they didn't have the indicators on the built area in the distance short line of 110 and was what 1 kilometer, 10 kilometer, and 50 kilometers from the coastline. So we produce these data sets for them and then make it available. The same is for the Cartagena Convention. Now they're asking the same supply. The Ozone Secretariat, they've got their own data on CFCs and other substance, on phasing it out and on tracking the ozone hole. So they're asking us to provide this platform. So now we are listening to users. Some of the data, we place them because we know they are important data that are usually requested on indicators, and other data are really following the request of member states or the UN country teams. For example, the UN country teams have the duty to track the progress toward sustainable development goals, and they ask us to produce this weather common country team platform, which Andrea has developed. And so we are starting from the demand of those common country team, and each country has the right to request a customized platform for them. So if you are a mountainous country, you don't really care about what's going on in the ocean. And if you're a small island developing state, you don't really know about snow being decreased in Switzerland. So we customize our product according to the request of the common country analysis. When it comes to the EC country fishes, it was a request for the European Union for the Green Deal to know how they're going to spread the billions to support this progress towards sustainable development. And they wanted quite the opposite. They wanted something that is the same for all countries, so that every country has the same data they can explore and decide the priorities. And so we designed for them, and they asked for 8 pillars, which was their request. And then we we interviewed experts for the best indicators for each of those 8 pillars. So it's not us who decide on the content. And in UNEP, we have actually a team that is selected for selecting what is in and what is not in. So our aim is not to have every kind of data that exists on the environment. That would be the Google of the data, and everybody get lost. We actually want quite the opposite. We want the minimum necessary data for the mandate of UNEP. But already the minimum data translate in quite a lot of data. Thank you.
And
Thank
you
you.
can add something in concerning the platform EC country fishes. And as Pascal said, it's built on the demand, the precise demand of the people, and is of course oriented for decision makers. And we have several interaction between the other part, and with some discussion, some modification. And now we have a test period for 1 month in order to see how the people react to the platform. And also we have to keep in mind that it's a preliminary, it's more than the pilot study, of course, but it's a preliminary phases. After this, there will be a second one that could be more designed on the needs, on the real needs. So we hope for this case that we will go really in the direction of the user and not of the productor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to invoke the chair's authority to pose one question to Alex. Alex, are you still online? Are you with us?
Yes, for sure. I've been following very interesting discussion.
Very good. I think the exchange we just had showed that matching policymakers' demands with data offerings is kind of a nutcracker, which gives me the opportunity to get back to you. What I liked about your conclusion was that there can be no partnership without offering incentives to each and every partner to contribute to this partnership. Partnership is a word we've had for some time, and since Johannesburg, it's gone in some directions and not others. In your experience, how do you find these incentives? What are the kind of 2 or 3 main incentives that you would offer a partner to become a partner in a partnership?
Well, first, you have to have impact and relevance. And I'd like to just to give a direct answer to the previous questions on the table. Is the difference here is to have impact. If we put there a data analytics platform for Somalia, it is not the same for sure, because Somalia has different priorities, such as water, such as conflict, such as climate risk, climate change generally. So if we put together accessible data analytics and predictive analytics in the future for Somalia, we need to make sure this is completely relevant and is different from putting their data for Vietnam or for Colombia. For instance, Colombia, definitely a predictive platform will have detailed indicators on extractives, whereas water and conflicts in Somalia are the most relevant thing. So I think there's a big difference from the past if you turn your data valuable with value. What is in it for me, which is a nice story. There's a nice story about meetings involving Goldman Sachs, that when you have Goldman Sachs people around the table, if they start to flip their fingers saying, what's in it for me? And that's how Goldman Sachs acts in meetings. So if you start to see 2 or 3 people together asking, what's in it for me? That's exactly the incentive model. And the partner, let me give you the example of GRIDs. A partner like GRID-Geneva invests in these because the value added of GRID-Geneva is on advanced data analytics, turning data into information and knowledge, and remote sensing, advanced remote sensing, okay? It's not the same investment that, for instance, RADI in China will bring to the network and to the partnership, because their incentives is on high volume processing of geospatial maps. Okay, it's not the same incentive that is given to GRID's UFOs, because their incentive is about the Earth observation and satellite imagery data analysis, and particular focus, for instance, with Landsat technology. So my answer is the right incentives come naturally, because before a partner becomes a partner, it has an exploration of its own values and its own core values and incentive to join the partnership. That's the way I think we are putting it differently this time, because we're inviting partners for the World Environment Situation Room for the sake of their benefit and their incentive in the partnership. Okay, what I've just demonstrated with the grids, I could easily demonstrate with companies like IBM. IBM, we started a collaboration where they told us our interest is in artificial intelligence and advanced data analytics and predictive analytics. That's it. Google search became with the Earth engine. Our interest is on the Google Earth and exploring how they tackle the SDGs on water, for instance. Okay, and the same came from Descartes. because they can't join us because they have advanced remote sensing analysis. So that's what they are doing for the World Environment Situation Room. So I hope I'd like to give examples, real life examples, because they demonstrate what does mean an incentive. Back to basic means what's in it for me. That's the answer.
Thank you very much, Alex. I think when you get to the point where you can say it comes naturally, then it shows that you have really thought this through and you have a lot of experience in actually making it happen. And with this, I think I would like to conclude and thank both panelists for their insights and the audience for the questions, and hand back to Diana. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jörg, for moderating this last session. And it's now time to conclude. And I have the pleasure to turn to Pascal, the director of UNEP GRID-Geneva, for his conclusion.
Thank you very much. And really, thank you, Diana and Harvey, the Geneva Environment Network that makes it possible. And it's always fantastic. And we are right on time. And that's no random. It's always like this. So it's really a pleasure to work and to show all this work, because we know, we are convinced about, we really care about the environment, we really care for the planet. We don't do that because we care about data. We really care about the environment. Data is just a mean to get somewhere. If it's just to, get some 0 and 1 and process them in binary code, what's the point, So we only do that because we do believe that having great data will help us to find the very narrow pathway to sustainable development. Time is really, really pressing. It is important also to let people know and to put facts on the table. But at the same time, this is not enough. And I, as a data scientist or environmental scientist, I also know that I need to have the relay of other people who know how to trigger emotions. So it's not only the scientist that needs to do these things, it's about triggering changes in the entire society. And I just conclude with this small story. When in 2006, we organized an exhibition along the Lake Geneva on satellite imagery of before and after, forest, no more forest, nice landscape, desert, small city, big cities. We just depressed everybody, and that did not trigger action because people get afraid. And the next year, we did an exhibition called Let's React, Réagir in French, at the Botanical Garden. And it was before, after, solutions. And I think it's important not to only flag the problems, but also to flag solutions. What can people do at different levels? It could be about your lifestyle as an individual or consumers. It could be about laws and regulations if you are a policymaker or at the national level. It can be new technologies or new research if you are in a research institute or high-tech R&D. It can be finance, and if you are in the economy, or it can be restorations and everybody's got a role to play. But we have so limited time and so many emergencies to deal with. It's important that we know where to act in priority and how we can do that. And I really hope that the World Environmental Situation Room would be one of these tools that address this need, that help to prioritize actions, and that we can provide the world with the right facts that unfortunately the fake news are trying to disorient people to the point that some people even think that the Earth is flat. Now, I was wondering how my satellite was going to circulate around the flat Earth, but obviously this is not the case. So we bring here facts, and the facts is that there is an emergency to do something, and it's time for action. Thank you very much for your interest in our research. There is more to show, and we will try to organize more often this kind of scientific display for know-how with partners. Thank you very much for having followed this Science Day.
We have a few events coming up, and just bring to your attention on Monday, we have the next session of our nature-based solutions dialogues, which will focus on water with the various experts in the run-up to the World Water Forum. So hope to have you all online on that occasion, or many others that will come in the next weeks, months to come. Thank you all for staying that late with us. Bye.
Congratulations. Thank you.